across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yeah, welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Charlie Rowley. Good to see Charlie back in the hot seat. He'll be back very soon right here on Talk. Coming up this afternoon, the Reform UK candidate in the Makerfield by-election says that politics needs more, quote, normal people in Parliament. The comments were made on that special edition of the BBC's Question Time programme last night. Do you broadly agree with his words? We'll have more on that in a couple of moments. Also this afternoon, the US State Department has called for an end to two-tier policing following the murder of Henry Novak. In comments likely to deepen tensions between Number 10 and the White House, the US described the case as a symptom of civilizational decline. I've got a funny feeling this kind of stuff is already going on in the States, so we'll investigate that a little deeper in the show. And the risks and threats to the UK are greater now than at any time since the Cold War. These are worrying comments from the Chief of Defence Staff, Sir Richard Knighton. He said we need to rethink our priorities. More on that as well. We'll bring you everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Does British politics need more normal people? Very simple question. Should ordinary people become members of Parliament? On the face of it, that's a pretty obvious question, isn't it? Well, yeah, of course, absolutely. Parliament is supposed to represent the public, and who better to understand the challenges of everyday life than those who actually live it? If your boiler's broken, your train is late, your mortgage has gone up, you probably have a better grasp of many voters' concern than someone who spent 20 years hopping between think tanks in Westminster. This was a point raised by Reform candidate Rob Kenyon on Question Time yesterday, and there's something rather refreshing about it. Let's have a listen.
I think a big move away from career politicians would certainly help, and having normal people involved in politics. Andy touches on us being the fastest growing economy. Does anybody in Makerfield feel that we've got the fastest growing economy? Or is it all just kept in Manchester? We keep giving our council tax. There's a bigger percentage every year being taken by Manchester. While Manchester thrives, we're struggling to survive in Wigan. We've been left behind, so my point would be get normal people in politics, people who care about the place, people who live in the place and people who want to stay here and not use it as a stepping stone for other things.
No, it's not an entirely new debate, but it's been given a fresh impetus and booster rockets and all the rest of it. And this, of course, is one voice. But nonetheless, it's a common criticism of our parliamentary system that the people running are out of touch. They're mostly from pretty good middle-class, privileged backgrounds. Most of them seem to have gone to Oxford or Cambridge. Politics can seem like a closed shop, populated by career politicians who know the theory of life better, of course, than the actual practice of it. But there is a bit of a catch on this, and I speak as somebody who grew up in a working-class background myself. Running a country is not quite the same as running a neighbourhood Facebook group. Parliament deals with economics, law, foreign policy, defence, complex legislation. We wouldn't expect a random MP to perform heart surgery, and perhaps we shouldn't expect complete novices to navigate every challenge of government either. So the ideal Parliament probably isn't filled entirely with experts or entirely with ordinary people. It needs teachers and lawyers, nurses and economists, business owners and academics. Democracy works best when Parliament looks like the country that it serves and when competence is as valued as representation. And it's filling in that kind of void. Do we just need more normal people in politics? And could we start... Do you have to be cut from a certain cloth? I mean, obviously, the obvious answer to that will be, well, if you look at the Labour Party over the years, it's been crammed full of former union characters. These would have been seen as shop floor stewards, and those that have worked, John Prescott would be an obvious example of that. He worked on the ships in the Merchant Navy, he was a union man, and he became Deputy Prime Minister, and nobody would suggest that he didn't know how to squawk at the dispatch box. We miss the likes of Prescott, even if you wouldn't vote for him in a million years. We have David Wooding with us, the journalist and political commentator. Good to see you, Dave.
Afternoon.
It's interesting, isn't it? I don't know what the percentage would be. I suppose Labour will always have a greater percentage of what you'd call working class people. Yeah. I do notice equally Labour also have a greater percentage of half-wits, but that's maybe a personal opinion. Those that wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't imagine, are filled with wisdom and political acumen in the same kind of way. So you've got Jacob Rees-Mogg on one side, the Angela Rayners, if you like, on the other side. I mean, who makes the best MP?
Well, people who've had a bit of a life before Westminster, and
100%.
I think that's what the Reform candidate was aiming at when he said that, because Andy Burnham is trying to present himself as one of you. I think his catchphrase on his posters are Andy Burnham for you. He's presenting himself as a local man in Makerfield, and they're trying to fight. It's quite a conundrum, this. Both men are trying to fight this on local issues. It's all about Makerfield, and the people in that part of the world, I worked there for a while, near Wigan, they're very proudly loyal and locally, you know, Wigan people. I went in there as a Liverpudlian from, 10 miles down the road, and I was a bit of an outsider when I went in there. It's that sort of a clannish northern place, fiercely proud of their roots. Andy Burnham's presenting himself as such, but really the bottom line is he's only going in there because he wants to be Prime Minister, and that's what the argument's about. Yeah. Andy Burnham, of course, he's never been outside the Westminster bubble since he became left university.
He did I thought he did a good job of making it sound like that wasn't his backstory yesterday, and. He's a very good communicator. He knows what he's doing. We can have a little listen to him now. This is him talking about his leadership hopes. But it was undoubtedly a proper northern panel and a proper local panel, pretty much local, that they had on Question Time last night. I mean, some said it's the first time Question Time in years has actually got the panel right for this purpose. Yeah. I mean, you hardly got it wrong, really, because you're talking about candidates for a by-election. Let's have a listen to Andy Burnham speaking on the same debate that we heard Rob Kenyon speaking on from BBC's Question Time last night.
I'm not somebody who gets ahead of myself. I can't do anything unless I'm lucky enough to get the support of people here. But if I get your support, I would seek to represent you at the highest possible level and give this constituency maximum power and influence. I think Wes Streeting seems to have launched a leadership contest, so if that is running, I would seek to join it.
What he seems to be saying there is that if I'm Prime Minister, then I can do better for this constituency. And I think he cited some examples as to when he was in the cabinet that he was able to still be quite localised in his focus. I don't know how much you buy into that, but that seemed to be his message.
I think, I'm a local guy. I live in the area. I'm fiercely loyal to you, and if I become Prime Minister, I will make sure that Wigan area gets a lot of... Now, somebody did point out in the audience last night that all the money since he's gone to Mayor of Manchester has been on buses in the centre of Manchester and trams and lots of investment in Manchester. What about us in Wigan? Yeah. It's only a few miles down the road.
I think Rob Kenyon made that point as well.
That's how they feel. Yeah. But I have to say, I felt a bit depressed about the whole situation last night watching it, because you had Rob Kenyon as playing as the local guy, putting the locality first, and Andy Burnham, we knew what he was about, saying the same thing. But on the one hand, you had Kenyon, who was not an experienced politician, and it's shown through at times, you know, when he was asked awkward questions about things he'd written on social media in the past. He really was rumbled by that. And
it was a bit of a cringe moment.
Yeah.
And actually, the greatest cringe moment, I have to say, he did have a great moment when he was talking about immigration with the Green Party candidate. But I did... You're right, he wasn't very good at... I mean, you could argue some of the things he'd written on social media there isn't really a defence for, but there is a way that you can apologise and defend it. Yep. And I don't think... arguably because of his lack of experience, I understand that, but there was an awful... What the Green Party candidate obviously thought was a sort of gotcha moment when she asked him to look down the barrel of the camera and apologise to Carol Vorderman. I mean, it was almost the sort of thing you might ask of Paula Venables, saying, look down the camera and apologise to all those postmasters.
Absolutely.
I mean, it wasn't the post, it wasn't Watergate, for God's sake. It was a tweet that he'd written something. He didn't even make the tweet.
15 years ago,
Yeah, he just happened to make a comment on it. It was a pretty gross stuff. But, I mean, the idea that the Green Party woman had some kind of moral high ground in this moment, it all looked a bit daft.
And then when she was rumbled over the anti-Semitism in the Green Party, I thought he would have weighed in and given her a bit of a pasting, but he didn't, because he didn't. I don't think. But he knew how to deal with it.
I know social media isn't the barometer of everything, Dave. But there's a lot of people on social media who said they thought his sort of lack of experience was. In this context, bearing in mind this fellow had never been on TV before, let alone the biggest political panel show in the land. So quite a daunting, nerve-wracking task, I would imagine. And he was probably the only one on the panel who wasn't at some level already either a professional politician or a professional in that kind of sense. So he was at a disadvantage. And for some people, I think they thought that was quite endearing.
Yeah, and the reason I say I found it depressing, Ian, was on that one point, you know, the inexperience of the man who is a local guy who's a proper normal person, and he is a normal person. That might appeal to a lot of people. On the other hand, Andy Burnham, who was again presenting himself as a local person, but with real experience the way he did it, but they were applauding him when he said things like, what we need is a different kind of politics. And yet again, here is a politician going on with all these phrases that mean absolutely nothing. What is the different kind of politics? Is he going to be that different from Keir Starmer when he gets in number 10?
He's making a lot of this. I'm going to completely recalibrate the political system.
I mean,
what does that even look like?
And he said it in great language, and it was really put together by a professional, slick politician, and all the slightly Labour-supporting people in the audience were all applauding him and cheering him. And I don't think they really understood what he was saying, but nevertheless, that's the different kind of politics. It's the same kind of politics, coming out with words that mean nothing.
In terms of does British politics need more normal people, when I was listening to Rob Kenyon, for example, just two people, both in the sporting world, that came to mind. One was Wayne Rooney, and of course, when Wayne Rooney first came on the scene, you know, he used to play for God's greatest football team, Everton. Sorry, Dave.
You need some humour in the programme.
But, absolutely. But Andy Burnham, of course, also an Evertonian. But Wayne Rooney could hardly answer a question after a match. Do you remember that? Yeah. And now that's not Wayne Rooney. The other one was Stephen Hendry from the World of Sport. Remember when Hendry was first on the scene? He was like he was so nervous. And now he's a commentator, and he's great at it. So, you know, Kenyon and others would grow into that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, he should do. I mean, this is great experience for him, whatever happens.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll get a career in politics at some stage. But I just felt perhaps it was... If people watched that last night, it's very difficult to gauge where it's going. I would say Andy Burnham, because of his experience, the fame factor, and the words he's using, he might just sneak it.
There was a really odd moment as well where the Tory candidate, who's a guy called Michael Winstanley, Andy Burnham said to him something like, "Oh, Michael, we've known each other for a long time," and Michael looked really chuffed that almost Andy Burnham had heard of him, and it was a really odd, almost it was a slight snapshot of subservience, and I thought that's not what you're meant to do. I'll go through the candidates in a moment, but of course they weren't all on there. There were just a few of them. There is precedent for Restore got very upset and said, why are we not on here? But there is a bit of a methodology. This isn't a BBC thing. This is just how they... Do you remember when UKIP and Brexit Party used to make the same complaint? Why are we not on this panel? Why are we not part of the... Next time round, on a general election, Nigel Farage and Reform will be on the panel.
Yeah.
But previously, because of the weight of support and electoral provability, whatever the phrase is, that's the way it's worked out.
Yeah, it was interesting, though, to put that... It was quite a good panel in as much as the main players were in there, even though the Greens and are pretty fringe on this one. You did have the
wasn't there.
Binface wasn't there. That would have been fun, wouldn't it?
Would have been good.
I loved his manifesto. There were some great things in there.
No, I haven't read it yet.
Oh,
I
really? I'd recommend it. There's all sorts of wacky things in there.
Good reading. Yes, maybe that would have perhaps done Rob Kenyon a favour if Binface had been on the panel. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that would have sort of livened things up in the Kenyon camp, perhaps. But the whole point of does British politics need more normal people? Clearly, the instinctive answer is well, yes. But I remember I've lost count of how many times that I've spoken to MPs and said, how come you didn't make the cabinet? Why did you not, did you not want to go that way? I can think of two reasonably famous MPs who said to me, I'm just not quite bright enough. And I'd think, what, really? You're super bright. And they said, well, no, you've kind of got to have, even if you disagree with them, even if you think they're crazy, even if you think that there's a certain intelligence that goes with taking those jobs on.
Absolutely. They are major jobs. I mean, you and I went into the lobby to report on politics, and the first 5 or 6 years, getting your head round all the economy and foreign affairs. Do
you remember when you didn't know what an early day motion was?
Oh gosh! I mean, I remember my first lunch with the minister, my first week in the Parliament, and I started swatting on all this stuff on his brief, and it was so complicated. So I just went in and said, look, I don't know anything about what you do, just tell me about it. And then he was quite relaxed about it and told me all about his work. And
it does sort of slot in eventually.
Yeah. It is a lot.
I remember David Blunkett saying when he became Home Secretary that essentially you do a PhD. He said, I did a PhD in international terrorism in 48 hours. And he was... Literally, he said, that's all I did because I had to know this stuff and had to be across it. And that was just one part of his job. Then there's all the policing stuff, and then at the time, the prison stuff, before they divvied it off, etc. So, I mean, you've got to have a certain brain about you. And would it therefore be reasonable to say that people who are from middle-class backgrounds have probably had a better education because either money paid for it or not mummy paid for it, might have been mummy, might have been daddy, money paid for it, or they'd kind of had extended learning through their circle of they'd gone to university automatically where maybe their working class mates down the road didn't. So is there something to be said about that? Whether we like it or not, the average middle class kid is probably more intelligent than the average working class kid. Is that where we're at on this?
Well, I think the word here, and it's come in for some bad publicity in the past week, is diversity. It's about having a mixture of people from different backgrounds, and by that I mean working class people. You need some MPs in there who are working. You need that on newspapers. You need young people and old people, so that you know all about the Disney films if you've got young kids, and if you're near a pension age, you're thinking about your pension, and you have a wide experience of life. And I think you need people from all different backgrounds, people who've worked in business before they became a politician, for instance. They're very useful because they know how to run something. So you do need a good mix of people. It's no good. You also need orators, of course, to be number 10. Look at Keir Starmer. I mean, he's not very good at that. And then you had somebody like Tony Blair, and even Boris Johnson, who was had a great charisma. So you need all balances of charisma, intelligence and down-to-earthness.
Absolutely. Does British politics need more normal people? 0344 499 1000. You can call us on that and leave a voice note, or you can message 87222. And let me give you the full list of candidates for the Makerfield by-election. Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats. Count Binface Party. Andy Burnham, the Labour Party. Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party. John Dyer, Independent. Ed Gemmell, Climate Party. Paul Gould, Independent. Alan Howling, Lord Hope, the official monster raving loony party. Robert Kenyon, Reform UK. Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild. Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield, Green Party. Peter Ward, Rejoin EU. And Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. They are the candidates standing, which will be, it was 2 weeks yesterday, wasn't it, that by-election is on its way. Lines are open, just gone 20 past 1. This is Talk.
Varda Kalakane was a 32-year-old black man living in, an immigrant, but with British national status, living in Nottingham, which is a city that is roughly 50-50 in its ethnic split. Yeah. And he murdered 3 white people and tried to murder 3 further white people. And not once in any part of the conversation or reporting was there any racial profiling or even the question raised. What if it had been another way around?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 25 past 1, almost 25 past 1. Let's move to this story. The White House demanding the end of 2-tier policing. This is curious. This is the US State Department, Dave, said that the case was a symptom of civilizational decline that must be rejected across the West. Now, it comes, of course, in the wake of the police inclusion element and some would say responsibility over the entire harrowing, horrific and deeply disturbing footage that we've seen of poor Henry Novak's last moments on this planet. And as a result of that, it's suggested that, 2-tier policing, there it was, absolutely in action. What I find interesting is that I remember a couple of years ago someone saying to me, this 2-tier policing that people talk about, it's a great import from the States, that they've been at it for years, particularly in places like California, where, for example, they've got this policy that if you steal something from a shop and it's under about $1,000, no one's going to come and investigate. It was argued by some that crime favours a certain demographic that are more responsible for that crime. 2-tier policing. The White House can get in the bin. What do they do lecturing us on civilizational decline when they started it?
Yeah, they are meddling a lot in European affairs, aren't they, under Trump? I also wonder whether that's a little bit of get you back, because they had a bit of stick over from around the world, in fact, over the Black Lives Matter protests in the wake of that incident. And I wonder whether they're feeling, hey, you've got your own problem now. Yeah. We're going to step in on this one, and it's the reverse of the Brits taking the knee.
Yes.
And effectively making a comment about something that happened in the USA. And perhaps they're now feeling, oh, we'll just have a little dig back. That's maybe what's going on there.
There was David Lammy was asked this morning whether he would take the knee for Henry Novak. And it was a proper cringy moment because he didn't quite know what to say. He sort of stuck his vague lawyer brain on and said, well, I don't think that's what the Novak family are asking for. I don't think this is... and he was challenged on that. So, well, you know, you were all over it when George Floyd was killed. And he said these are not the same kind of cases. They're completely different. And it was, I mean, it was bizarre in the... I tell you that it's largely a separate issue. The taking the knee thing, I always thought was kind of quite a big bit of choreography to show your respect for saying... Like, normally someone says, you know, will you please bow your head for 10 seconds and we'll have a moment's thought for X, Y, Z. Yeah. You know, literally, if you're in a cold, wet car park and someone's saying, get on your knee... That takes, I mean, some people haven't got the hips and the kneecaps to cope with that, apart from anything else. So there's a physical element to it, but it's quite a gesture, isn't it? It's quite a sort of odd gesture to ask somebody to do. It's not an instinctive kind of move where you could salute, or you could stay silent, or you could bow your head. Get on your knee.
And when you think...
But if you don't, you're person non grata.
So when you think we had the current Prime Minister, who was at the time leader of the opposition, with his deputy kneeling in his own office and posing for a picture to
for about 3 days, he was never off his knee. No. I mean, it was extraordinary.
And we even had police officers on the knees over here.
People shouting at them in the street, get on your knee, get on your knee. Really? Yeah. And coppers doing it?
Yeah, and it was amazing how the George Floyd case took off over here. And there are some similarities here. I mean, the police did not have their knee on the throat of Henry Novak. Yes. But nevertheless, he was treated appallingly after having been stabbed and was dying.
Telling officers he'd been stabbed. I know everybody knows this story now, and 9 times telling officers he couldn't breathe. Yeah,
so... I mean, I don't know why the White House have put this out, other than perhaps to feel they want to interfere or back at you over the George Floyd murder.
I would love anybody that's listening to this who lives in the States or has lived in the States, what your view is of this also being an issue in the US. I can absolutely see California adopting that similar policy, and I can certainly see New York as well, as in New York City. You know, there's a new mayor in town who I would imagine will be quite sympathetic to some of those two-tier policies.
Yeah, isn't it bizarre how the pendulum always swings too far one way, and then when it swings back, it swings too far the other way. We had it with trade union rights. I mean, in the 70s, the trade unions were running the roost, and then Thatcher came in, took it back in the opposite direction, then it got too far the other way. Now Labour are taking it back the other way again, and it's going too far again. And the same with diversity. You know, I don't think black people in this country, any ethnic minority, want anything other than to be treated with respect and equal to other people in the UK, so that skin colour or religion or sex or sexuality has nothing to do with the way you're treated. That's what we all want, really.
Well, that's the funny thing. I mean, if you look at the whole kind of DEI initiatives, I mean, that literally was invented in the United States. If you look at critical race theory, literally invented in the United States. The whole DEI kind of thing was, you know, imported from the United States. So I'm not quite sure when they talk about sort of two-tier stuff and all of this. I don't think they would, if you did just even the cursory investigation onto this, I don't think the States would come out really well.
No, because we're only going along the lines of the policies that they invented.
I bet you the White House has a DEI policy. And Trump probably blissfully unaware of it. Now, if you're the president, you don't run every office in the White House necessarily. I get that. But I bet there's a policy at play.
There probably will be. There's one everywhere nowadays, though, isn't it, really?
Wherever you go. HR departments.
Yeah. It's important.
Which used to be called personnel.
We shouldn't, but you know, we're really, hopefully, we're getting closer to the time when we don't need to be told that everybody is equal. That's the dream, isn't it? That it's all within our persona from birth, and that we know that everybody's equal. But you know, unfortunately, some things have to be done to adjust people who just don't see it that way.
Well, indeed, not everybody is equal, of course.
No.
I mean, equal in abilities. You know, that's why we have people who are, you know, I don't know, where do you go with that? You know, are we going to try and have equality of outcomes in the world of sport? I mean, that'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Imagine watching the football on a Saturday, saying, well, we know what the result's going to be because no one's allowed to actually win because they've won too much, so they've got to draw back a little bit so they don't win overtly to make it all fair.
But we already have that, Ian. It's called VAR.
I think it's called Tottenham Hotspur. We have to pause there. Dave, great to see you.
Pleasure.
I don't think we're going to see you for a couple of weeks, are we?
No, but I'll be back if you want me back.
He will be back, yes. He's filming a special project, so we can't say too much about it. It's not I'm a Celebrity, I can tell you that much. Or is it? Find out more. Dave Wooding, thank you to him. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. Does British politics need more normal people, to coin a phrase? The words of Rob Kenyon yesterday. Thoughts on that? Lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 1:30. Debbie says, you say Rob Kenyon wasn't a good speaker. I don't think I said he wasn't a good speaker. I think Dave Wooding made the point that he wasn't as good as some of the others. But look at our Prime Minister. Surely he was better than Starmer. Well, I mean, Starmer is not the... Starmer is a very fluent, intelligent man. No one doubts that. Whether you have the extra thing, that kind of mesmeric ability to... Maya Angelou, the writer and poet, said on the lines of, it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel. And that is so true in the world of politics. Max says, Robert Kenyon nailed it. Just listen to the phone calls, the talk, full of passion, common sense. And they are the working people, experience of life by the bucket load. Yes, more ordinary people in government, please. This, of course, was the Reform candidate for Makerfield yesterday, talking about this on BBC's Question Time. Let's have a listen.
I think a big move away from career politicians would certainly help, and having normal people involved in politics. Andy touches on us being the fastest growing economy. Does anybody in Makerfield feel that we've got the fastest growing economy? Or is it all just kept in Manchester? We keep giving our council tax. There's a bigger percentage every year being taken by Manchester. While Manchester thrives, we're struggling to survive in Wigan. We've been left behind, so my point would be get normal people in politics, people who care about the place, people who live in the place and people who want to stay here and not use it as a stepping stone for other things.
Now, Mr Kenyon, of course, has been billed as the local plumber hoping to become Reform's 9th MP. Polls suggest that it's a tight race with Andy Burnham, the current mayor of Greater Manchester, and former Cabinet Minister. So, with trust in politics seemingly at an all-time low, do we just need more normal people there? Let's speak with broadcaster and journalist Michael Crick. Michael, afternoon to you. I mean, you've covered goodness knows how many elections and fallouts in the world of politics. This is in your DNA. It's not an entirely new question. Do we need more? You know, we've often said people should get engaged in politics, and when they do get engaged, if they're not quite as slick as, I don't know, Jacob Rees-Mogg, they get criticised.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a problem here, basic problem, that the House of Commons is less reflective of society as a whole than it's been for a very long time. I mean, in 1945, the Labour benches were absolutely stuffed with people who came from working backgrounds, coal miners, railwaymen, signalmen, dockers, the lot. And if you go through the guidebook to the House of Commons from 45, you come up with some amazing backgrounds like that. There are very few people with genuine working class backgrounds in the House of Commons now, probably no more than a dozen. And Mr. Kenyon would be another one in that category. There's far too many people with sort of similar communications, PR, think tank, human resources type of backgrounds, middle class, professional, white-collar backgrounds these days. Too many samey MPs. And I think when you're talking about the House of Commons, a greater variety would be an asset. But when you're electing an MP, you're not just electing a member of the House of Commons. The House of Commons is the pool of people from whom government ministers are chosen. And it's important that we do have people of huge skills and brains and experience as government ministers. Being a government minister, especially these days, is incredibly complicated, linking up all the problems of the world. We do need the best and the brightest people governing this country. I think the caliber of government ministers in recent years has gone down, and that may account for some of the problems we've had within government. So there is always that tension, being representative of the community as a whole and yet having talented people in politics.
Is it also, though, Michael, a reality that if you come from a more middle-class background, you're more likely to have had a better education, you're more likely to have gone on to university? If you look at Oxford or Cambridge, the former being, I think I'm right in saying, your former haunt back in the day, if you look at those places, the number of politicians that successfully come from those universities, etc., is there an irredeemable reality that middle-class people are just a bit more educated than working-class people?
Yes, but it's not. Nonetheless, there have been some very successful politicians, particularly on the Labour side, who haven't had a particularly good education. I mean, Ernest Bevin, I can't remember what age he left school, about 12 or something. And he was the man who set up NATO, did extraordinary things as Foreign Secretary in the Attlee government after the war. Angela Rayner, she left school at 16, had a pretty poor education. She has rose to become Deputy Prime Minister. So it doesn't necessarily follow. And of course, you talk about Oxford and Cambridge. These days, there are more people of working class backgrounds at Oxford and Cambridge than there have ever been. It's a complicated issue. But we do need people with the brains of, Winston Churchill or Keynes or sorry, I've forgotten his name now. The guy who founded the NHS and came up with the ideas behind the NHS. Beveridge. And of course, Nye Bevan is another good example. Somebody from a working class background who achieved a huge amount in politics. So it's complicated. I'm saying we need variety amongst our politicians. We need variety of experience. We need people who haven't necessarily, as Rob Kenyon says, spent their whole life in politics, but we also need some incredibly clever people. And what you're finding, I think, right now, and when I go back to Oxford, which I do quite a lot of the people who are involved in student politics there that in my time would have planned to have become politicians or journalists, like as in my case, now a lot of them are going off to the city and making lots of money. Now you can't blame them.
Good luck to them.
Amazing salaries on offer. But we do need some of those people running the government.
That's true.
In important ministries, in the Treasury, in the Foreign Office.
Of course.
Trying to deal with these complex problems.
I feel very strongly
about this. And we're making it harder and harder for really good people to go into politics.
Yeah.
We don't pay them enough, but you'll never persuade the public that.
That's very true.
You know, the idea of you disqualifying people because they've got second jobs, I think that's a terrible mistake as well. And so we need to make it easier for people to go into politics, make it less stressful in terms of family life, in terms of the intrusion that inevitably happens when you go into politics. We're a long way from there, but it needs a lot more thought, this.
Yeah, I'm always reminded of, I mean, John Prescott would be another good example, I guess. You know, was a union man, worked in the Merchant Navy. And there was a great documentary. I don't think it was you interviewing him at the time on this, but he was complaining about class and the lack of opportunities, and he went through this whole list of, you know, you can't get anywhere if you're a working class kid. And then the interviewer just went, John, you're Deputy Prime Minister. Yes. You've done all right out of it, rather proving that you can make that journey. And I suppose, you know, there's different types of working class people. You know, I came from a background where I wouldn't have, you know, squeaked without feeling nervous. And but somebody like Prescott and those that gravitated towards a sort of more union, were good orators. I mean, they were great speakers. And you look back every now and again, you know, if you're bored, just YouTube a couple of great Prescott speeches, and they're really good.
And that would have come from him having to rally the seamen. He was in the Seamen's Union. You know, when they went out on strike, which they did from time to time, he'd be rallying them down on the quayside, no doubt, and persuading them all that they all had to go on strike. Yeah. And the role of the unions in this is crucial. I mean, the unions are much less important in politics nowadays, much less important in the Labour Party. Yeah. And in the old days, you know, more than half of Labour MPs were of trade union backgrounds. The people who'd been union officials, had been lay officials, who'd been on the shop floor, and who were genuinely representative of all sorts of different walks of life. Now, there are very few strong union people in the Labour ranks in Parliament. And the other thing is, it's much harder to get chosen as an MP if you're not well off. It's easier if you're middle class. You can get the time off work. You know, if you work in a call centre, you can. It's very difficult to turn around and say, well, I need the next few days off because I'm going to a selection meeting. And it costs quite a lot of money becoming selected to be a candidate.
Yeah, that's true.
For any political party. Yeah. All the travel you have to do, buying people drinks, finding somewhere to live while you're, you know, waiting for the election. And there are all sorts of constraints which mean it's much harder for ordinary people to get into Parliament. I mean, I agree with what Kenyon's basically saying there, although I'm not sure he's a very good example of a normal person.
Well, I mean, I guess, you know, people will have their own decisions on whether they think he is good. I mean, I did think something, one of the many dynamics, if you like, or dimensions of last night that cropped up was the thought of this guy that, you know, half an hour ago was sticking radiators on walls, and there he is on Question Time, sitting alongside Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, former Cabinet Minister, very famous politician of his day. I thought that in itself is a journey, right? I mean, there it is. So he kind of, given all of the considerations around that, sitting there in a TV studio, you've done lots of it, I've done a fair amount of it as well. It's always a bit weird, those places. They're kind of odd, clinical, strange setups, especially when you're pre-recording something as well, bit of stopping and starting and all the rest of it. So in that respect, I actually thought he held his own quite well.
He did, actually. And I mean, he got into trouble once or twice, and I think it was wrong of him, and it has been wrong of him, not to apologise to Carol Vorderman over the appalling stuff that appeared on social media. But he'd obviously rehearsed it well and had practiced some really good lines. And I thought that Andy Burnham was slightly subdued and looked very tired to me. I was in Makerfield on Wednesday and going around the constituency, talking to as many people as I could on the streets. And I really did get the sense that, you know, this is not in the bag for Burnham at all. And I think there are a lot of commentators based in London who assume that Burnham's going to win because he is widely popular in Manchester and the Northwest as a whole. But there's an element here of Burnham, you know, there are a lot of people there who feel that they're being exploited by Burnham, that the by-election was unnecessary, that he caused it for his ambitions. And whereas 50 years ago, a seat like that might have thought of it as a bit of an honour to have the Prime Minister as their MP, That doesn't seem to be persuading people, that thought.
I tell you what I did think, Michael. I thought Burnham, the cleverest thing he did was not to attack Rob Kenyon. He was probably the only one on the panel that didn't really have a pop. And clearly, I don't think that happened by accident. I think he'd thought about that, and his best move on this would be to not go down that particular route, because he only stands to lose by doing that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that it hadn't occurred to me. But thanks for pointing out. You're absolutely right. He didn't, and that probably would have backfired on him, because Reform would have said, look, here we are, Cambridge educated. He's got all the benefits of his background and so on. Bullying this poor local plumber. There will now, if he gets elected, Mr. Kenyon, there will be 3 plumbers in the House of Commons, because Hannah Spencer, of course, won the by-election in Gorton and Denton. And there's also John Trickett, the Labour MP for Hemsworth, is a former plumber. I
never knew Trickett had a wrench. I had no idea, Michael. I thought it was just his sandwiches and his brief in that bag, not a set of spanners. Brilliant, Michael. Always good to have you on. Thank you. That is Michael Crick, the broadcaster and the journalist, with analysis of all of that. And he's quite right what he said at the beginning, that Parliament used to be crammed full of people who were more representative of events. Even, but it started to change when Thatcher entered Parliament. I think it was 1959 or something mad like that, which sounds 1,000 years ago. At that stage, certainly in the Conservative Party, it was still all, Lord this and Sir Marmaduke that, the rich landowners. Thatcher was seen to many of those people as a bit of a joke, because she was a commoner. And she was just from a middle-class family. The old man, I think, was a grocer. They had a little shop, didn't they? And he was a lay preacher as well, standard middle-class stuff. And those old Tory duffers on the back benches were never going to put in place a middle-class person, let alone a middle-class woman. And that was the kind of thinking. And I think she really nailed it. We've still got lots of, if you like, professional politicians. But, you might not unreasonably say, look, if you want to become an MP and you're 22, you might go, well, I'm 22, I'm not. Because they often talk about working on, I said it at the beginning, working for think tanks. They've only ever been in Westminster, these people. But if you really feel passionately and think politics is something for you, and you get a job as work experience with an MP, and you do that for 5 or 10 years, and you get to know your way around the system, how it works, and what best you can do, then that's also an understandable route. We just don't want everybody taking that route. I'll give you the candidates for Makerfield again in just a moment. Barry says, afternoon, Ian, I agree we need a variety in politics, but courtesy and good manners would be appreciated. Ivor in Weststone says, except that most graduates are infected and brainwashed in wokeism at university. Thatcher had experienced people around her, like Sir Keith Joseph and Nigel Lawson. We need people who can create and need people who believe in smaller government, says Ivor. Thank you for that. Loads of comment coming through. There's lots to get into on this in terms of where you're coming from. The question we threw out is, does British politics need more, quote, normal people? They were the words of Mr Kenyon yesterday on Question Time. Your response on that, 0344 499 1000. And these are the list of the candidates standing in the Makerfield by-election. Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats. Count Binface Party. Andy Burnham, the Labour Party. Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party. John Dyer, Independent. Ed Gemmell, Climate Party. Paul Gould, Independent. Alan Howling, Lord Hope, the official Monster Raving Loony Party. Robert Kenyon, Reform UK. Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild. Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield, Green Party. Peter Ward, Rejoin EU, and Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party.
Vardo Calacane was a 32-year-old black man living in, an immigrant but with British national status, living in Nottingham, which is a city that is roughly 50-50 in its ethnic split.
Yeah.
And he murdered 3 white people and tried to murder 3 further white people. And not once in any part of the conversation or reporting was there any racial profiling or even the question raised. What if it had been another way around?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots to talk about here. This one comes in from Anne in Archway, who says, I thought Kenyon did well on Question Time. On the subject of old tweets, he made it clear he didn't have the same views now without the usual desperate whining. I wonder whether we've got to somehow kind of reach an agreement on old tweets and Facebook posts and the like. There are still people who think that Twitter or any other form of social media is just a little bit of fun where you can monkey around, say anything you like, be as offensive or horrible as you like, and be anonymous if you want, of course. When in fact it's globally published work and is treated to the same laws as the publishers of the Times or the Sun or the Telegraph. You have to adhere to the same rules, but you can't tell that to Bob in Arbroath when he's saying something. And I don't think people are aware that what they're writing is being seen by others when they're chatting among mates. You know, it's often, oh, I've only got, I've got 200 followers and we're all like-minded people, so if I say something a little bit risque, does it matter? Sort of slightly Jim Davidson rugby club humour, you might want to call it. I think he referred to that himself yesterday. So do we now draw a line out and saying anything that was said pre-2020 is like we ignore, or something of that nature, when people didn't know better? They saw social media as almost, it was meant to be Wild West. It was meant to be the place you could vent and not worry about anybody being around. It was meant to be the place where it didn't matter if you said something a little salty or a little bit kind of ribald. It was fine. That was almost the point. Now we know better, etc. Is that what we do? I don't know. All I know is that, say, well, you tweeted this in 2015. You said, you know, yeah, when he was 23 or something, yeah, he told a sexist joke to a mate. Is that it now? They made such a big play of that on Question Time. Let's go to Tristan, who's over there in Bolton, not a million miles away. Tristan, what have you got for us?
Hi, Ian. Good afternoon. It's just a point on the MPs and do we need more normal MPs?
Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, well, I don't know about normal, because what is normal, but we definitely need MPs that have got, life experiences and a damn sight more common sense than what the people in government at the moment have, because it would seem that they're not capable of running a bath, let alone,
do you reckon? Because when I used to work down there in Westminster, I've got to say the weirdest part about it, Tristan, was that when you met all these people one-to-one, they were really like good people. You think, wow, they're really fun to be with. You can have a pint with this MP. They're great. When they get together, something weird happens and they become morons. And I could never quite work. I thought, hang on a second, that's the bloke that I had a drink with last week, and here he is on the telly sounding like a nut job. What happened between then and now?
I think they were different masks, don't they, depending on who
maybe,
yeah,
there's probably a bit of that. There's probably a little bit of that goes on.
You look at the recent things with saying about, that such and such a body is causing division in the country. Yeah. Well, you look at MPs in the House of Commons and they're divided between themselves. They don't know, I won't say what's going on in my head, but they don't know from their elbow from the kneecap. Yeah. It would seem. There is
a bit of that. They come across as kind of very distant and aloof. But then simultaneously, when I look at, coming from an ordinary background myself, and obviously my life has changed, as lots of people's life changes. It's unrecognisable to what my mum and dad had when we were growing up. But when I look about all the people around me at that time, I wouldn't want most of them running the country either. That would have been outrageous.
No, there's that. But, I mean, like what you were saying earlier, and the gentleman that was on the phone to, you get the people that have got the top jobs in government. Yeah. Great. They're book smart. They're very, they're university educated. They're really, really clever people. But they have zero, it would appear they have zero common sense. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, it says this in the book. Yeah, all right. But sometimes you can't implement what it says in the book, and you've got to find another way around it. And you haven't got the common sense to do that.
But haven't they all got something in common? Because if you think of, take two very different kind of MPs, neither an MP anymore, John Prescott on the left, who was a great speaker, working class guy, great speaker. Jacob Rees-Mogg, not middle class, upper class, and a great speaker. Both of them felt they kind of had the key to life. Both of them think that they knew what an injustice looked like. Both of them think that they know the right roadmap to solve problems of this country. But both have completely different views.
Yeah, but if you put two people like that together, one who's like highly educated, one from a working class background, usually you can find a solution to things. One will think what the other person hasn't thought of.
Well, yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
I mean, if you put your collective brains together.
Yeah, exactly.
There's something in there. I mean, Angela Rayner has got a lot of shortcomings, and I'd hardly be on the Christmas card list at the Rayner household. But when she stands there at the dispatch box, she was really good.
Yeah.
She knew how to form an argument. She could sound fluent. She sounded confident. Stick her in a TV studio under scrutiny, not so good. But she didn't lack, she didn't have that kind of, she didn't have that working class fear of being, scared to speak up in front of educated or impressive people. I was riddled with that stuff as a kid.
Exactly that. I think people from, I don't like Angela Rayner one bit, but I think people, like me from a similar background to her, don't mind if you know what, I'm going to tell you what I think, and if you don't like it, that's not my problem, that's your problem.
Indeed. Tristan, great call. Listen, I've got to move because the news is about to kick in. You've been brilliant, thank you. Great call from Tristan. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. Ben in Stockwell says, politics is being hijacked by racist people like those in the Reform Party, says Ben. Well, the idea that you would just simply... it's such a daft thing to say. I don't even know where to start. Not least for the non-white people in the Reform Party, of which there are many. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the news headlines. The time on Talk, 2 o'clock.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 2 minutes after 2 o'clock. Yeah, welcome back. Home of Common Sense. So the US State Department has called for an end to two-tier policing over here. This follows, of course, the horrendous murder of Henry Novak. In comments that are likely to deepen tensions between Number 10 and the White House, the US described the case as a symptom of civilizational decline. If you look a little closer, I think there are issues also in the United States on this one. We'll come to that in a couple of moments. Got some great guests to speak to on this. Also this afternoon, the Reform UK candidate in the Makerfield by-election says politics needs more normal people in Parliament. These were his words on that special edition of Question Time last night. Do you agree with him? Do we just fill the place to the brim with working-class voices? Is that the answer? And the risks and threats to the UK are now greater than at any time since the Cold War. These are the comments of the Chief of the Defence Staff, Sir Richard Knighton. He says we need to rethink our priorities. A real defence danger, perhaps. Details coming up. 0344 499 1000. This comes in from Daryl. It says, Ian, I'm a 61-year-old lorry driver. I had 30 years in the police. I was a vehicle mechanic before that and a forklift truck driver. And I've worked in a factory and on the land. My dad wasn't a tool maker. Would I make a good candidate? I make a good brew and I talk lots of common sense as well. Do you know what? Based on that, Daryl is exactly who we need in Parliament, particularly the time of working in the police, in a skilled job like a mechanic, driving a train. You know, it's like a lot of boxes are ticked there. I'm tempted to say the one thing you do have to have is the ability to be able to speak. And I don't mean just speak. And I'm going back to the working class thing. You know, my dad could never have given a speech. I often wonder how he managed to give a speech at my sister's wedding. He was a very shy and quite a nervous man in that respect. He was he was working class subservient. There's different types of classes within classes. And that was just the background. My mum and dad were cut from the same cloth in that respect. But he had mates who could command a room. They had a sort of raconteur feel about it. They could walk in a room and start talking from the same back. So you've got the sort of Del Boy working class, people who can talk and can convince, and they're quite mesmerising to listen to. You go, wait, I'd like to be like him, that kind of person. Then you've got the other sort of fairly quiet thing. And I suppose you could apply that to all classes. It's just the one I know best. But, yeah, so working class candidates, that's great, as long as you can string a sentence together and find your way around a labyrinthine argument, which is often the hardest thing to do. 0344 499 1000. I want to talk about this. The US State Department is calling for an end to two-tier policing. This follows the murder of Henry Novak. In comments that, as I mentioned, are likely to cause a little bit of a problem between Number 10 and the White House, and it's been a little bit prickly of late, let's be honest. The US State Department described the case of Henry as a symptom of civilizational decline which must be rejected across the West. So what's America's skin in the game on this one? Let's speak to Errol Moorcoach, spokesman for Republican Overseas UK. Errol, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. How did this one land on somebody's desk in the White House?
Well, certainly I think it's been a process that has been building through social media and the attention that both our countries seem to have on each other. Certainly the UK government and people in the UK have had opinions about our government, and our government has opinions about your government. And I think that's what friends do. Friends are supposed to tell each other when things aren't going well. I mean, there's a lot of old proverbs, you know, an enemy will agree with you, a friend will argue. And I think that's it's an important thing here. So the United States and the UK, with this presidency, have a special relationship. And because of that special relationship, I do believe that the interest is from a good place. It's not as though Americans are coming over and trying to say, you need to do things this way because we're superior. They're coming over and saying, hey, things are not going well domestically in your country, and we've had some examples of that, and here's how we would perhaps go about it. So it looks to us, just from the outside, I had a good friend who was almost deported while he was a student in the UK because he had a small knife that his grandfather gave him in his pocket. Meanwhile, people are carrying ceremonial blades around and doing these kind of things, and you start to wonder, that does sound like a couple different tiers. Now, obviously, that brings into the controversy of who's involved in what, but I think it comes from a good place, and I don't think it's a negative thing for the people. Now, the leadership, sure, but they never liked each other anyway. So does this even fracture the relationship any further? I don't think so.
That's absolutely, that's a very good point, actually. In terms of the wider issue of a sort of kind of, touchy-feely approach to policing and law, there is an argument, Errol, that says, hang on a second, this was imported directly from the United States. DEI, critical race theory, universities, campuses in the States, more left-wing than an Albanian Keep Left sign. I mean, these places, California, for goodness sake, might as well have Stan written on the end of it. It's been so left-wing over the years, of course, due to a selection of politicians and governors and the like. Laws that say don't arrest somebody if they've stolen any less than $1,000 worth of stuff from a store. This is all part and parcel of the same problem.
Yes, we are guilty. Hand up. This is our doing. I went to UC Berkeley. This was invented by the DEI Marxists that took over the U.S. campuses, that took over U.S. institutions, and exported that ideology using USAID for other more international places, and using the general malaise and easy infiltration into academic campuses that they use in the US to take over the UK campuses. When you take over that situation, you take over the young people and you start changing the culture from within. And that's where eventually they hit the Overton window. There is now a pushback. That goodwill that was there no longer is there because there's blood on the streets. Yeah. It was all well and good when we were, enjoying each other's ethnic foods and having cultural transmission. But one of the sad things that I want to point out to everybody that we have in the West, in the US, and unfortunately in the UK, is when you have mass amounts of diversity, which is in many ways good, without good integration, elections become ethnic headcounts. Yeah. And ethnic headcounts lead to very different tier policing or different tier outcomes in different regions. And so that's not the making of a strong society. We have that problem in the United States. And we're seeing it happen in the UK, and maybe that's why some people in the US are why are we so interested in the goings on in the UK? Well, we speak the same language, so we can understand the videos. That kind of helps. And number two, we're the reason for it, as you said.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was having this discussion with a friend quite recently that, a lot of that DEI stuff has kind of created the very problem it purported to solve, which is sort of the worst and grimmest of ironies in some respects. And I suppose when it comes to recent events, and the reason this has become a live subject, Errol, in this country, as you are more than aware, is because of the murder of Henry Novak, which was horrific. The comparisons that were drawn, of course, were that of George Floyd in the States. Now, people say it was a pivotal moment. I don't know if it was pivotal in some respects. It seemed to me it was a point where the United States and the United Kingdom lost their minds, frankly, over what had happened here. And nobody is defending the actions of a police officer, and nobody is, celebrating because a man died. Simultaneously, he wasn't Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa, for goodness sake. So I could never quite understand, but, tipping points do crazy things, right? And this was certainly one of them.
Well, yeah, this certainly was one of them. I mean, what we saw with George Floyd, I think the separative difference there was George Floyd was in the middle of committing a crime. He was involved in drugs. It's a terrible, horrible situation, and that is there compartmentalized, and we understand that. What happened to the young man in the UK is unconscionable. He was handcuffed and basically bled out with no dignity, and he wasn't in the middle of committing a counterfeiting crime. He wasn't overdosing on drugs. He was a young man who was completely disregarded for the lies of the person who had basically tried to murder him. And I think that stark contrast, when you see that white wrist in the handcuffs with no blood on it, while these people lie through their teeth on the body cams, and the police officers show no compassion to the young man, it brings out that emotion in that turning point. And that's perhaps why you see people in the streets. Now, the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd thing, that ended up to be a completely different basket that went kind of against them in the end. In this case, this could be a really good turning point, because I know the family of the young man is asking for common sense policing. They're not asking for people to take the streets and burn down the cities and turn the cars over and, this and that. It seems like they're really, much more sensible people. And I think that might be be an impetus for change in a positive direction, whereas BLM and those riots did nothing but cause billions of dollars of destruction, and ultimately all of that money was stolen by fraudsters.
Yes, indeed, and similarly over here. I mean, it became, I mean, everything you've just described, and you know, watching certain parts of the United States burn to the ground after all that happened, with Sleepy Joe almost. I would go as far as to say almost endorsing it by the absence of any condemnation. It was curious, but to see it happen over here as well was utterly bizarre. You know, you had people walking around the streets of this country carrying posters of, you know, some kid or some person, a serial criminal from Wyoming or something that nobody had ever heard of, as well as the George Floyd thing. People were just picking up mugshots from the internet and putting them on signs saying justice for this. It's like, what the hell? How have we arrived here? The world has gone mad and nuts at the same time. Nuts.
And it's all by design. I mean, the people in the academic institutions, I mean, I don't mean to harp on them completely, but all of this comes out of this sort of Frankfurt School change of ideologies, change from within, deconstruction, decolonization, and ultimately it's anti like technology, anti-progress.
Yep.
These people are stuck in the past, only trying to tear things down. And ultimately, when you look at the results, I mean, you know, look at the economic results for a lot of these behaviors in Europe and the UK. It hasn't been exactly a very good situation. The United States has gotten away with it because of AI and tech and its tremendous resources. But when you look at a country like Canada, it's gone completely flat for 20 years. Well, you know, doing all these DEI policies. Well, in the end, when your people end up poorer than ever, then it doesn't work. And you can't fill up other people's cup when your cup is empty. And so I think that ultimately is the problem that we're all facing now.
Indeed. Errol, great to have you on, sir. Thank you. Let's speak again. Errol Morkoch, she's the spokesman for Republicans Overseas UK. Great words from him. And yeah, that whole contagion of wacky policies that are meant to look after people that, well, frankly, most of whom never asked to be looked after. So you find this weird sort of scenarios playing out where organisations and groups believe they have to behave in a certain way, even though they were already behaving in a perfectly good way. But let's get the critical race theory people in to train our staff so that our staff are not racists. And you tap them on the shoulder and go, but your staff were not racist beforehand. Yeah, but we want to make doubly sure. You're going to pay this company like £10,000 a head. We've got 500 people work here. They're all going to be trained not to be racists. But they're not racists, already not racist. Yeah, but they'll be doubly not racist, won't they? That'll be a good thing, yeah. No, it won't be a good thing. It's utterly bonkers. And you do that, and then you ingrain something, and then you get people into a situation where somebody is scared of any kind of altercation that might result in them being accused of being a racist. And that, of course, is, we know, as what's happened with the police, but with the NPCC, the National Police Chiefs Council, we have an even more kind of troubling dimension to it, and that is that if you play this by the advice as released in March 2025, last year, you will alter the outcomes. You will artificially alter the outcomes. It's a bit like saying we're not going to... there was a story once, wasn't there, when they said they haven't detected any more drugs in Camden Underground Station or something for like 6 months. 6 months! Wow, they used to get loads and loads. There was loads of drugs that they would stop people coming out of the station. The old sniffer dog would sit down quietly next to them and they'd search them. They had, you know, a couple of grams of Peruvian marching powder in their back pocket ready for a classy night out. And it suddenly stopped. And it's brilliant. Yeah, that's because they hadn't gone there. Nobody had gone with their dogs. No cops had showed up on their usual Friday stop and search with Sniffer Bag McDougal on the case. That had stopped. The result was, hey, there's no drugs. Well, that doesn't really work. You can't. That's just artificially stimulating the outcome. It's nonsensical. Ian's in Cambridge on the two-tier issue. What have you got for us, Ian? Afternoon.
Well, good afternoon. Gosh, dear me. Do you remember me from 6 years ago? I met you outside the station.
Yes, I do, actually. I can't forget you. Ian in Cambridge.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah, you were wearing a top hat and lipstick, weren't you?
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't.
Come on, you were. You can tell me. It was a phase. I understand it, Ian. I'll help you through it.
Yes. Anyway.
Go on, fire away.
Well, I was saying to your producer, it's interesting. The police officers who tended to my father and unfortunately couldn't revive him, but they were marvellous, very professional. And I remember that from 6 years ago because it was 3 months after the George Floyd situation, and I said to these officers, I mean, it was on the phone at that point. I said, it's interesting that you'd had so much bad press and so on because of the Black Lives Matter marches and so on, which I didn't go on anyway. And I said, thanks ever so much. You know, you did your best, and it was good. You know, the outcome was not what we wanted, but they were professional, and that was it. I can't believe that a whole police force or service would be so, well, let's say, woke. I don't believe that at all. And I don't think that numbers of police officers get out of bed to make the wrong judgments or
I agree, and I've said this consistently. You know, for all we know, the officers concerned in this case might not have even been on one of these courses or whatever. They would probably say, I have no idea what you're talking about. I might have got it wrong, but I didn't get it wrong for those reasons. I got it wrong because I just called it as I saw it.
Exactly.
Which turned out to be horrific, but that's, you know, that might well be their story.
The better thing to do, I think, the old phrase is like this, you know, if there's bad apples in the basket, then it's better maybe to pick fresh ones from the tree, you know, and unplug a lot of this pathetic woke nonsense. You want to get back to the basic policing, which is fighting crime, preventing crime, and protecting innocent people.
Indeed. It's a fair point. Ian, thank you very much indeed for that. I think his last words there were absolutely bang on. And I do honestly still think, I don't think the whole police force, called the police service, the whole police service, which is made up of police forces, I don't think it's all infested with some kind of DEI indoctrination that's taken place. There is clearly some of that, and we absolutely know because of high-profile cases when the police, when it's involved, often the police, it's very rare for the police to shoot somebody in this country, but it happens maybe a couple of times a year, if that. And if that involves a non-white person, the questions that are asked are very different to if it involves a white person. So I think the police are just aware, almost without anybody telling them, that, you know, you do run a bit of a risk. And because of the seriousness of this, if you're accused of being not just somebody who got it wrong, but also you're a racist, then that cop is out of action for a number of time. Now, the IOPC, the Independent Office of Police Complaints that look at this stuff, I can tell you now for a fact, there are officers that have been off work while an investigation could take, and this is not normal, but it's happened, 10 years. So you're off 10 years, you've got the sword of Damocles that's hanging over you. What's going to happen to me? I've been accused of manslaughter or murder. And not just that, also because of the colour of the guy's skin or because of some other factor within his demographic or physical appearance, whatever. So I'm dealing with two things here. So police are scared for a number of reasons. And similarly, just using a taser, regardless of the colour of the person on the other end. You know, look what happens when we say, why did the police have a bloody gun on them? And when they do use it, all hell breaks loose. So you can see again why, because they'll be taken through this. And yes, you should have a process and the police should be held to a higher account. We all understand that. But it also comes with some pretty uncomfortable experiences that can wang on for flipping years if you're the cop. So, yeah, I can see why they're a bit hesitant sometimes. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Vardo Calacane was a 32-year-old black man living in, an immigrant but with British national status, living in Nottingham, which is a city that is roughly 50-50 in its ethnic split.
Yeah.
And he murdered 3 white people and tried to murder 3 further white people. And not once in any part of the conversation or reporting was there any racial profiling or even the question raised. What if it had been another way around?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Stuart, who's in Ashton in Makerfield, says, I'm a resident. I can tell you this would be an easy reform win with anyone. But Burnham, at the next general election, I've no doubt Reform will win most of the red wall in the northwest. It also can't be underestimated how Restore splitting the vote on the right could put Burnham in power. Fortunately, they don't have the manpower to put such resources in all seats during a general election. The bit I don't get, is it because Labour voters are going to come out for Burnham, but if it wasn't Burnham, then they just wouldn't come out at all? These can't be people who would have voted Reform or Green or whatever, but, oh, it's Burnham, so we'll vote for him. I mean, it's a completely different party because this particular candidate in Mr Burnham is, of course, so intrinsically linked with central government because his ambitions, and he let it be known on the telly last night, are obviously to become the Prime Minister. So you're sort of not just voting for an ordinary constituency member of Parliament if you're voting for Labour. You're voting for the bloke that has a very good chance, should he win, of becoming the Prime Minister, possibly within weeks of winning a by-election. So who are the decisive voters here that are only voting Labour because it's Burnham? Were they non-voters before, or were they with another party? That's kind of a confusing picture in many respects. And it's interesting looking at the polling, because some suggested early doors, before this thing fully kicked off, that the idea that Andy Burnham is using it, and Rob Kenyon made this exact point, using it as a stepping stone to a, quote, better job, then that might put as many people that would be enamoured by Andy Burnham might be put off for that specific reason. This is about career building and making your CV more impressive, some would argue. Stuart says, at the next general election, I've no doubt Reform will win most of the red wall seats in the northwest. And says, fortunately, they don't have the manpower to put such resources in all seats during a next election, talking about Restore. But, of course, on that point, Restore would, I think they would say, well, just watch us, because we will. They, of course, are also standing. Let's talk to Mark in Lincolnshire. What have you got for us, Mark? Afternoon.
Afternoon, Ian. Just caveat this call, if that's all right. I'm an ordinary bloke. I'm not a career politician. I don't know everything. All right? There, I've caveated the phone call.
Don't know everything. We only really want people calling in who know everything.
Yeah, not overly impressed. I mean, Rob Kenyon seems like a decent enough bloke. I mean, you could have a pint with him, I guess. Seems all right. But I think he's getting way too easy in the time here, if I'm honest. listening to a lot of the people, certainly online and, people ringing up the station and what have you, it's like, hang on a minute, this guy isn't, he's not, baby wet, if you know what I mean. They ran this guy in 2024. He's a current sitting councillor, yet he doesn't seem to have any real clue about anything Reform are actually doing. But I mean, to be fair to him, in that regard, he's probably ideal for Reform because he likes to talk about the problems. He doesn't have any real solutions. The issue that I have with people like Rob Kenyon is, well, particularly more Reform than anything else, is this Reform's idea of working class. A little bit thick, a little bit, well, he's not polished, is he? But he's a good lad. You know what I mean?
When you say thick, I mean, some would say that's unnecessary to call him thick, Mark.
I'm not calling him directly thick as such. What I'm saying is...
You're saying that will be a perception.
He doesn't seem to have any real clear idea of what... like last night on Question Time, he's talking about... he made a really good comment about, Manchester and, people in Makerfield don't feel like they're any better off.
Yep.
It all goes to Manchester. That was a really good comment, but he doesn't tell us what he intends to do for Makerfield. He just says, well, ordinary people need to get into politics.
Well, that's true, but then you are somewhat limited in the format, aren't you? Because you've got 5 panellists, you've also got an audience, so there's limited time to get a lot of points and a lot of questions. You're not going to be able to get through I'm sure there's a Lib Dem supporter that's saying, well, the Lib Dem candidate didn't really say what they intend to do either.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough, but this guy's already done about 3 or 4 interviews.
But it's a bit exceptional. Doing question time is quite it's quite an ask, isn't it? I mean, that's something big.
Well, yeah, it's going to be quite daunting. I wouldn't like to do it. Most people wouldn't like to do it, but I'd give it a go if I was in that position. I just think, as I say, when you look back at these other interviews, he doesn't seem to have any clear idea of what he actually wants for Makerfield. Whereas you could probably bracket him along with somebody like Burnham in that regard. Whereas there's some, other candidates do seem to have a clear idea of what they want to do going forward for the actual area. This is what I mean. He's talking kind of the right game.
Yeah.
In that, local people for, local areas and, to improve the lives of the local people.
But you are speaking as a Restore supporter, though, it should be said.
Yeah, that's obviously, that does cloud it a little bit, I will admit that.
Yeah.
But then again, it's also fair to say the majority of people that are ringing up and on the Reform side come out with absolutely ridiculous crap about Restore all the time. At least I'm trying to form an objective view of this guy as a candidate. My point is, at the end of the day, Ian, what really ticks me off with this is the reference to being a bit thick wasn't necessarily directed at him as a person. What I'm saying is this what Reform think the working class is? Because if you're my whole thing is, if you're wanting to get into politics and you're like me, for example, and like I presume Rob, I'm from a rough council estate. I've never had anything my whole life, etc., etc. I've got the same story, the same background probably as this guy. If you then want to go into politics to make things better for the area, then you better bloody learn your stuff. If you're going to fill Parliament with people like Rob Kenyon, how well do you think that's going to go?
All right. Now I hear you, Mark. Listen, I'm going to move just for time, but thank you very much indeed for that. We'll put you down as an undecided, I think. That's Mark in Lincolnshire. Sarah in Morden says, if Burnham wins the Makerfield election, can we stop pretending the Labour Party stands to give working-class people a voice, having just taken the voice away from a working-class person for a career politician whose only ambition is number 10? It's rather interesting. I think the Burnham thing that will be... if it works out for Mr Burnham and he then becomes Prime Minister, remember, this man is telling us he's going to dismantle 40 years of our political framework, that it's all gone wrong since Thatcher, basically. That includes Blairism, which Andy Burnham supported, a bit of Corbyn thrown in as leader of the opposition, which Andy Burnham supported. All of that is going to be dismantled. We've got a new way of doing politics, and that's seismic. I mean, that's not something... we often talk about the comparison of turning an oil tanker around, but and that's something that would take Generate, I don't know what nobody knows what it means, by the way. It sounds like something great, doesn't it? Wow, he's going to recalibrate politics. Brilliant. Have you heard about Burnham? What's he going to do? Recalibrate. Really? Wow. That's great. I can't wait for the recalibration. Is there a day for it? Are we going to celebrate? Will it be a bank holiday? Andy Burnham's recalibration? We don't know. Well, sit there and grab the popcorn, because I can't wait for this one. 0344 499 1000. Don't go away. Ian in Cardiff will be with you shortly. Lots more comment coming in. This one, all by the way, from Catherine in Cardiff. Dave Wooding, fabulous contributor. Dave was with us in the first hour, of course. Apart from appreciating what he has to say, I really enjoy listening to his voice. He's probably a bit younger than me, but I would still love to have him as my dad, says Catherine. It's a very nice comment. But Dave, sadly, is not here to hear it. Dave's one of the real good guys in this game, a political journalist of decades of experience, working-class Scouse guy, knows his stuff, knows the terrain. Proper decent hack, you could call him. Thank you, Catherine, for that. Lots of comment on the Makerfield by-election, so let's give you then the full list of candidates. Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats. Count Binface Party. Andy Burnham, the Labour Party. Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party. John Dyer, Independent. Ed Gemmell, Climate Party. Paul Gould, Independent. Alan Howling, Lord Hope, the official monster raving loony party. Robert Kenyon, Reform UK. Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild. Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield, Green Party. Peter Ward, Rejoin EU, and Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 25 to 3. Now, Britain's top military officer says the UK faces its most dangerous period since the Cold War. This is Sir Richard Knighton. He's warned that Russian threats are rising alongside drones, cyber attacks and sabotage. Let's have a listen to what he said.
I'm very clear that this is the most dangerous time I have known in my working life. And the risks and threats to this country are greater than I have known since the Cold War. And it is important that society and all of us recognise and understand that, and that may mean that we need to make different choices and different priorities.
Sir Richard Knighton speaking to BBC Radio 4. So does Britain need to spend more money on defence? Is it as simple as that? Let's speak with Colonel Simon Diggins, retired British Army Colonel and defence analyst. Simon, always good to gauge your view. Is it simply a money game? Throw more money at it, we'll become safer.
Good afternoon to you. No, it's not. I mean, we certainly do need more money into it. But as we're seeing with repeated defence manufacturing prices, whether it be the Ajax, which is the Army one, but we've had recently, the delays in productions of ships and various other things, the money's got to go into the right place at the right time. There is a problem at the moment, though, because the hesitation, the delay over the production and defence investment plan has meant that defence manufacturers who've actually got the plans and they know what to do can't proceed yet because there is money there. So there is an element where we need to be very careful that money is not so good money thrown after bad. And we've got I have to say, not a good record of that in the past.
Indeed. And, there's a part of me that always thinks, I'm a slightly daft optimist, Simon, I have to say. I always think, come on, ultimately everyone's going to play nicely. That fella in China's not going to do very much. And Vladimir likes to sort of preen his whiskers of authority to the world, but he's not really going to take down our NHS database, is he? But then I sort of have a reality check and think, well, actually, one of these guys or similar could, perhaps a sort of proxy agent on behalf of whoever, could do that. And, certainly on the issue of cyber, that certainly sounds to me from everything I'm reading, Simon, that it's likely to be the terrain for any future battle.
No, I think that's right, and we know we've had good reporting back from the heads of the various agencies we have, GCHQ, etc., that cyber attacks are increasingly frequent and increasingly dangerous. And you're right about also this kind of way in which the attacks are distributed. So it's not necessarily directly Russian government agencies who are doing this. The general mission's go out and disrupt, and that's what they do. And they use various proxies, they use criminals, they use people in places like Chechnya and people like that to do that on their behalf. That's always allowing, particularly Putin, the possibility of plausible deniability. I think we can always detect his fingerprints over it somewhere, but like McCavity, he's just not quite there when it comes down to it, which makes it very hard then to kind of gauge our response, which also means we need to actually, if you like, overbuild in terms of our reliance, in terms of our resilience, in order to cope with the threats as they come to us.
Do you agree with Sir Richard Knighton on his analysis that we're in the most dangerous period since the Cold War?
I think it's a fair analysis. I mean, he has the advantage of seeing everything that's coming in. We've had threats before. We've had 2001. We had the fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. But that was wars of choice at a distance from us. There was blowback into this country, but basically there was wars of choice at a distance. We're now under threat here in Europe itself. And it's not just the Russian-Ukraine conflict that's going on. We've seen the kind of the use of drones even over Dublin Airport. Nobody really quite identified what they were doing over there. But that's an example of the kind of reach of Russia and the reach of its proxies to be able to cause damage to us. Every month there's a report of Russian submarines over our undersea cables, Russian aircraft buzzing our airspace, etc., etc. So it's push on behalf of Putin and his personnel, looking for weakness and looking to exploit the weakness whenever they find it.
Indeed. And I mentioned the NHS database. I mean, there's obviously more than one NHS database, but if you considered an enemy or certainly a rogue state, literally taking out the digital capabilities of our health service, I mean, the knock-on effects would be, it would be like a war zone in itself, but without a bullet being fired.
Absolutely, because I think it's not just the damage to the patients themselves, what's going to happen to them, what their treatment, the kind of psychological effect on the rest of the population, knowing that their data was not secure.
Or everyone's record wiped, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, and the kind of helplessness that would generate that. Throw in a few electricity strikes at the same time where the power goes off, and it doesn't take very much, even for a well-developed, civilized country like our own, for chaos to evolve. You may recall, going back a few years, the chaos that occurred in New York when they had a whole series of power cuts then. It didn't take very long for that wonderful, great city to degenerate into chaos. We're no different from that. We're such a sophisticated society. We rely on all those systems basically working. Pull a few of them out, pull a few strings, and things start to disentangle. And I think we would be nature roughened and ridden to the claw pretty quickly.
Yeah. Simon, thank you. Always good to get your analytical view on these things. Colonel Simon Diggins, retired British Army Colonel and now defence analyst. Thank you to him. Lots of comments. Huey says, are you talking about the same Angela Rayner? Have you never seen the video of her being made a complete fool of at the dispatch box by Penny Mordaunt? It's not, if not, it's on YouTube. Yes, I remember that, although that was, it wasn't it wasn't about Angela Rayner speaking, it was about Penny Mordaunt picking into the policy. Penny Mordaunt was on a roll. Do you remember this? Do you remember that, Ryan? She had a whole kind of almost a weekly basis. She had this kind of like brilliantly written, almost slightly William Hague-esque in the sense of its sharpness and its humour. It was brilliant. My point about Rayner is that she's confident in a way that a lot of working class people would not have that confidence if it was all about the background they came from. And you think Rayner's background was, pretty colourful painful and unconventional in some respects. And there she is standing there at His Majesty's dispatch box, taking, in opposition, taking the Prime Minister to account and shouting, giving a speech. So she's got that thing of being able to impact. Whether you agree or disagree is completely irrelevant to the point that I was making, and that is that she's able to do it. She's got the confidence, and the kind of mojo thing is in the right place, as it were. This one comes from Rob in Burnley, and this goes back to the sad story of Henry Novak. He says, I cannot get my head around the persistence with which trying to handcuff the poor young lad. He wouldn't have smelled of booze. If they had checked, they'd have seen an alarming amount of blood. If he was drugged up, he'd only be cuffed based on risk, I think. It is extraordinary. Now, we understand that it is possible that there wasn't an alarming amount of blood, despite multiple stab wounds at that stage, and most of his injuries were internal. But there would have been blood somewhere. Isn't it horrible that we have to talk in these tones? But that... And he wasn't over the drink drive limit either. So the most he could have had would have been a couple of pints, and probably the last one an hour or so before this happened. But you're right. I mean, the handcuff thing, like we talked about this yesterday, I can't work out why, you know, they can come and arrest you at your house for murder and walk you to the police car without handcuffs. You know, we see that happen all the time. It's been one of the great almost marks of policing in this country, to the point that sometimes we think, why have they not got handcuffs on this person? They've just arrested them for... sometimes they do, depending. But this... I mean, whatever they thought was going on, they can't have surely thought this man's any kind of risk. Unless they went with the, he's probably drunk, and you know what a drunk person can do, they can swing out when you least expect. I don't know. But it wasn't just, as Rob says in that message, the persistence wasn't a case of click, click, the handcuffs went on. They were trying to grab his other arm. They even said to him, come on, place your hand in the other cuff or something. And you know, being moved around like that when you have... look, we understand from all of the pathology that it wouldn't have made any difference to his survival. But you have to assume it might have made a difference to how painful that experience was. If you are drowning in your own blood, you can hardly breathe. And somebody's sitting you up, laying you down, not sitting up again. I don't know. I can't answer that. Just awful. Charlie in East Sussex. Back to question time, Charlie. What are your thoughts? Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Yeah, it's quite interesting last night, I thought. I did tune in to specifically watch it. And I think when you're looking at Rob Kenyon there, he's obviously not the finished article. Looking at his body language, he did look a bit unsettled. You know, he had some interesting movements. He was touching his nose all the time. So, look, I think he's been given a little bit of a rough ride by people. And I think you've got to look at the guy's background. He's not the Andy Burnham type slick character that wears his black T-shirt under his suit.
I thought that was quite interesting, the black T-shirt under the suit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, he was dressing... there are words for it, but, you know...
Do you know what his... He had a lapel badge, didn't he? I don't know if anyone spotted what it was. I don't know what it was.
I couldn't see what it was, actually, to be fair. But
maybe it was a CND badge or something back from the old days, you know.
Do you know what, mate? It could well be. But I think with Rob Kenyon, obviously, I think reform hadn't really. What's the word I want to use now? I don't want to say polished, but they hadn't really briefed him enough, I think, and he hadn't been coached enough on how to respond when you're in a high pressure environment like that. And it is a high pressure environment because you know full well you've got all those people in the audience looking at you, scrutinising you. Can I vote for this guy? Or I'm never going to vote for that guy. You've got the people on the panel, and you've got also Fiona Bruce, which, and you know, I don't have an axe to grind with Fiona Bruce, but honestly, I don't like the way she conducts herself, but she's being coached to do that, I would say. The only thing I would say is, You look at that guy, Rob Kenyon, and then you look at the Green Party member next to him, and I just thought, oh my God, if anybody actually votes for her, then we are in some serious.
Well, it's a democracy. She will get votes. People have that choice.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But I think last night, it was a lack of coaching, and
I thought certainly on the social media stuff, that would have been, if I'd have been coaching on that. And I've done a little bit of that, not loads, but enough to have said, right, you're definitely going to get asked about this a lot, and you need to really be on top of your game to respond to it. I thought that was the lack. Maybe he did get that information, and maybe he, couldn't cobble it all together in his head when the moment came.
Look, Ian, he's not like you. You're in the media, in the spotlight. You're used to talking to a lot of people. I'm used to talking to a lot of people, and I think perhaps he was out of his comfort zone.
Yeah.
So a chap you had on before, where he said, I want to caveat my, what I'm going to say to you is, I think he was a little bit harsh, and I just think you have to look at people that are now being pushed forward. They're not career politicians. He's a plumber. Would you want him round in your kitchen sorting out the waste under your sink? Yeah, probably. Yeah. No problem at all. But we've got to look at it like that and say, okay, he's a normal guy, bloke in the street, having a go. That's basically my...
I think you're right. Well, I do need my bathroom doing, as it turns out. Seriously, Charlie, so maybe I'll give him a call, although I don't know whether he travels that distance. Brilliant, Charlie. Thank you, mate, for that. Charlie in East Sussex, and we'll bring you the list of those candidates. I know you're probably saying, well, again... Yep, we'll just make sure that everybody is aware that there are more than 2 or 3 people standing in this by-election. It was the Manchester Bee that he was wearing, and for those who don't know, that's the kind of city emblem of hard work, unity and resilience. That's what. So those who knew would have known, if that makes sense. Or those who know would have known. Knew would have known. Yeah. Some breaking news. Paul Quinn has been 52. This was the man that turned out, remember the story of Andrew Malkinson, who was wrongly jailed. I think he did about 17 years in jail, didn't he, for a rape that he did not commit. They eventually got the right man, Paul Quinn, 52. He's just been jailed at Manchester Crown Court for 24 years for the 2000 rape which Andrew Malkinson was originally found guilty of and sent to jail for an awful long time. 24 years. That is very much at the high end, and one would have to assume that perhaps the circumstances may well have fueled the sentence somewhat. But 24 years for Paul Quinn. This is Talk. We've talked a lot about the Makerfield by-election, so let's just remind you of all of the candidates. Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats. Count Binface Party. Andy Burnham, the Labour Party. Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party. John Dyer, Independent. Ed Gemmell, Climate Party. Paul Gould, Independent. Alan Howling, Lord Hope, the official monster raving loony party. Robert Kenyon, Reform UK. Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild. Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield, Green Party. Peter Ward, Rejoin EU, and Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party.
Vado Calacane was a 32-year-old black man living in, an immigrant, but with British national status, living in Nottingham, which is a city that is roughly 50-50 in its ethnic split.
Yeah.
And he murdered 3 white people and tried to murder 3 further white people. And not once in any part of the conversation or reporting was there any racial profiling or even the question raised. What if it had been another way around?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 0344 499 1000, 5 to 3. Before we go back to the calls, don't go away. Karen with you in a second. Jones there as well. Voice of Doom, day 10, I think. Is that right, Amy? Day 10. Day 10. It's the mystery voice. It's political, so you're looking for a politician, past, present, dead or alive, left wing, right wing, male or female. Very simple. Who is this?
In how we think about...
We think it's one of the hardest we've ever done. This could go on for months, years even. Here it is again.
In how we think about...
If you think you know who that is, 87222 is where you can give us your answer. There's no prize, by the way, but you do get the kudos of being the first to identify the mystery voice. We'll tell you after the news if somebody gets it correct. If they don't, it rolls over to Monday. Here it is again.
In how we think about...
87222. Karen is somewhere on the south coast. South coast is a long bit of coastline, Karen. Whereabouts?
Bexhill.
Lovely. But I love it down at Bexhill.
Well, we've got all the boats coming over.
Yeah, that's why I love it. Love go down there, boat hunting.
Well,
watching the comings and goings. Oh, what a way to spend an afternoon on that pebbly beach. What are you thinking, Karen?
Well, I'm completely, if ever there was an incident that shows us that absolutely true, it's this one. We've got police where they didn't even assess the scene. They simply took what one man said at face value. That police officer acted like a robot programmed with woke prompts and defaults. You've got a man saying his turban's been knocked off. That man appears well, is able to articulate. There's not a scratch on him.
He also said, if you remember, Karen, sorry to interject, he says, I've got a bit of a swollen eye, which he clearly...
He's got a bit of a swollen eye, but
which he didn't have.
Well, exactly. This is the brilliance of actually looking at the footage. So, yeah, we've got a man there that's saying that his turban's been knocked off, but he appears well, he's able to articulate, there's not a scratch on him. But there's a teenager who's on the floor, incapacitated, agitated, saying, and it breaks my heart when I hear it, and he sort of says, I've been stabbed. He's dying when he says that. And this is where I don't think this is really properly landing. A young lad, he's a little bit older than my son, a couple of years older than my son, is telling a police officer he has been stabbed. You know, how many people say that they've been stabbed if they haven't? And
particularly in an altercation when he's on the ground, writhing around in agony.
Incapacitated. The way he says it, his words are, I've been stabbed, he says. And the words that come back are really interesting. And this is why I say I don't get that it's properly cut him through and landed. The words of those officers are, I don't think. He also calls him mate, like he's a mate in the pub. But I don't think. Now, that tells us, I don't think, that he didn't even want to be sure.
Do you think, Karen, that he... it's hard, we can't mount a defence of the indefensible, but do you think, trying to pick it apart, we haven't got long on this, but it could be a case that the officer just thought, hang on, I've been to loads of calls like this, there's a drunk kid on the ground, therefore I'm going to run with it like that?
No, absolutely not. That is not good enough.
But he didn't think he was a stabbed kid, did he?
No, the point of the matter is, right, it doesn't matter. He's there to assess a scene. And this is what's going wrong in Britain, not just in the police as an institution, in the universities, in the schools, in everything, that they're in the judicial system, in the criminal courts, in the family courts. There is a lack of discernment, and discernment is important because it's part of judgment.
And indeed, listen, on that point, Karen, you get a great final word on that, and thank you very much indeed for that. Lots to get through. Let's get the news now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Yes, welcome back. Home of common sense. Britain's asylum system is failing to cope in the face of severe pressure. This is according to an influential committee. Always an influential committee, aren't they, of MPs. Cross-party MPs have warned in the report. The Public Accounts Committee said findings were disturbing and that the government was a considerable risk of repeating past failures. What, a government repeating past failures? Whatever next? We'll have more on that in a couple of moments. Kevin Foster will join us, former Immigration Minister. Also, the Reform UK candidate, as we've been talking about in Makerfield, says politics needs more normal people in Parliament. These comments were made, of course, on last night's special edition of Question Time. Do you agree with the words of Rob Kenyon? And did you know it's National Fish and Chip Day today? Oh, yes, time to celebrate that great British staple. So grab your salt vinegar and mushy peas, whatever next. We'll have more on that later in this hour. Everything you need to know. We'll bring you all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. This one in from Don in Chelmsford, who says, I once attended a racial awareness course. A bizarrely dressed lefty beard turned up. He said the ethnic population of this country is said to be, in this area rather, is said to be 10%. Looking out of the window, it's more like 15. It was at that point I switched off, says Don. Do you know, one of the areas that never really, a little bit more now, that never gets raised, and I've got enough mates who are of different backgrounds, ethnically or otherwise, who concur with this point, is that it's class as well. We don't talk about class enough. And I think so many areas of life where they've suggested that there's not enough non-white people working, you know, in boardrooms, for example. What is often really meant is there's not enough working class people who are making their way up the corporate ladder, whether they're black or white, brown, whatever. That's a clear problem. And what then ended up happening in so many areas, you just ended up with lots of sort of middle-class, posh, non-white people getting into jobs, whether it's at the BBC or somewhere in the corporate world, which ticked a box, but it still left working-class people, black and white, at the same kind of disadvantage. That's a whole other area, and one I'm sure at some point we will come back to discuss again. Now, MPs have warned that Britain's asylum system is failing to cope with control all but lost. These are big words from the Public Accounts Committee. They say the Home Office is relying on short-term fixes, despite spending almost £5 billion on asylum last year. Backlogs and hotel use are down, but small boat crossings have risen. We're plugging holes left, right and centre, it seems. Kevin Foster, former Conservative MP for Torbay and former Immigration Minister, is with us. Kevin, always good to gauge your views on these things. I think I might have mentioned this to you before, but I remember years ago bumping into Jack Straw when he was the Home Secretary. We had a very brief conversation about this, and his eyes glazed over when I mentioned the issue of immigration. It wasn't quite such a hot potato then, but I think there was a story around of the backlog at the time, and you know, the words that if you opened up a warehouse, you still wouldn't get enough of the case files in there, that you'd run out of space eventually. So it's always been a problem for the Home Office. It doesn't go away. The Public Accounts Committee are saying what's likely to happen is that the Home Office are just going to repeat the same errors. What's your take on this as somebody who's worked there?
Yeah, Ian, it's got to be said, this is a very thorough report, and to give credit to the cross-party committee that's come up with it, they haven't just taken easy options to take a pot shot at the Home Office. They've also highlighted, for example, the role the Ministry of Justice is playing in some of these issues, i.e. if the Home Office turns someone down, they then appeal it and it gets stuck in the courts, then actually the Home Office takes the flak for someone still being in accommodation, yet they can't get rid of them until the court appeal's being dealt with. Yeah. And that's the Ministry of Justice. And also the Ministry, in terms of housing, community and local government, is also cited as well in terms of its role. So, yeah, there's been problems there for some time. I think if I was being very radical, I'm the sort of person who'd say that actually there's an argument to have an immigration department in its own right to deal with many of the issues, and also to ensure a Home Secretary is also able to get on with dealing with things like day-to-day policing, law and order, and the other issues you want to see the Home Office more widely dealing with, rather than constantly focused on what's happening, for example, in the Channel and with migration overall. But no, it's a really good report, and it's just worth noting this would have been agreed by consensus. And given the members of this committee include Labour, Lib Dems, and Rupert Lowe, it just says to you, the level of concern they have.
It's interesting you mentioned about it being almost a separate department. Of course, it was years ago now that the Home Office did divide up and the Department of Justice was formed because of the sheer labyrinthine world of the Home Office. You know what it's like in that building. You could step down the wrong corridor and not be seen for years. It's vast, both physically and, of course, in terms of the complexities that it has to deal with. It seems, when you said it out loud there, Kevin, it seems extraordinary that this isn't a separate department already.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, you could also say that just shifting deck chairs around the cabinet table probably isn't going to be the resolution to the issues that are highlighted in this report. For example, it talks about, I think they're setting up an asylum group in the middle of the Home Office, and the MPs rightly say, well, that's great, brilliant, but what are you actually going to do? What's it actually going to achieve? What's its targets? What's its timelines? They ask, for example, on things like, you've got lots of people who are sort of in limbo in the system that we've told them they can't stay, but we haven't yet found a route to actually get rid of them out of the country or given them a date they're going to go. Well, that's in no one's interest, both the taxpayers and actually the individuals. That actually having certainty about what's going to happen sometimes encourages people to actually make their own way to an airport, not just try and string out their claim. Not all, there's plenty of challenges that do require removing people.
What would happen? You would have been in meetings, Kevin, where these kind of discussions come up, and you're there. I'm assuming, on some occasions the Home Secretary might be there, but it could be other advisors. We're talking lawyers. We're talking those with, everybody likes to have a pop at the civil service, but you know better than most, a good civil servant who's probably properly genned up on their subject is worth their weight in absolute gold. So you've got these characters around, and somebody must go, why don't we we've already decided that person A is not allowed to stay here. So 6 o'clock tonight, let's make that happen. What stands in the way of that?
A lot of times what will stand in the way, and we did some reforms on it whilst we were in government, will be they then suddenly remember they're a victim of modern slavery and chuck that claim in, or they suddenly remember they wanted to make a last-minute asylum claim. Now, there have been some changes, but of course, for a lot of this cohort, particularly the small boats cohort, it isn't so much the idea of, right, let's get rid of them at 6 o'clock. The biggest question is where to? So, for example, from Afghanistan, Eritrea, two big countries that are quite well represented in small boat arrivals, at the moment, there is no route of return, which is the formal term for someone we can kick them out to. So France won't take them back. We can't return them to their own country, although it must be noted there are some EU countries that are now doing returns to Afghanistan. Probably one of the few times a lot of Brexiteers would quite like to see the UK fall in line with the EU on that one. But let's just stick with it, that we can't return them to their home country. What do we do with them? And of course, that's where a third country deal comes in. It's why you see, for example, the United States, Marco Rubio recently talking about 20 third country deals, is because unless you've got somewhere to send someone to, then you can't get them out of this country. You end up stuck with them. And that's also the core business model of the people smuggling gangs. They say to some of their customers, well, look, even if they don't want you in the UK, where can they actually send you to? So there's a lot in this report. It's a good report. It talks about a proper comprehensive strategy. Talks about, not just having the this week's gimmick or great idea. You need to have a proper approach to this and the whole of government working on it, because that's sometimes what's missing. A lot of people will all very much focus on the Home Office, when in reality, there's lots of different parts of government that need to support delivering a solution on this one and make it their priority. And that's where really leadership comes. And we'll all take a view on whether the current Prime Minister is providing that.
Yeah, well, there's a whole other debate that could go on for a long time. Kevin, just before you go, separate conversation. We're discussing here this afternoon, does British politics need more, quote, normal people in it? These were the words of Rob Kenyon, the Reform candidate on that Question Time debate last night. I think notionally we all go, well, yeah, that sounds obviously like a good thing. You came from, pretty standard beginnings. You're not Oxbridge. You went to a nice school, but not a private one, as I understand it. I could have got all of that wrong, so correct me if I did.
No, you're right.
But nonetheless, did you ever sense that when you were there in Parliament, whether from those around you in government or just your fellow backbenchers or opposition backbenchers, Did you feel there was a lack of normality in that sense, a lack of normal street experience, if you like?
Yeah, there can be some who've come through, you know, a particular luck passage. You know, I think most people know I'm not a massive Mr. Sunak fan, and he never really showed me any great understanding of the challenges of ordinary workers. And I think at the moment, you know, Parliament, it's quite interesting how Labour MPs, you go back 40, 50 years ago, a lot of them would have been trade unionists, shop floor workers who then worked their way up through the unions and then into Parliament. So, yeah, we do need to have normal people. Ultimately, we want people in Parliament who are going to deliver. And, you know, Ian, you've listed my background. I went to a state comprehensive. The reason I got there is I had very loving parents, and it's going to cut me up a bit. My dad died Monday.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry to hear that. But clearly a pivotal.
To get me through university, he did 7-day week, you name it.
Wow.
That's how I made it. Mike Foster, that was his name.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
Listen, Kevin, thank you. And a great tribute to your dad as well. Thank you, Kevin Foster, former immigration minister. And that's fascinating. It's rather sad, of course. He's just lost his father. But the memory of somebody working hard for their kids, and most of us would do the same thing, wouldn't we? You'd do that for your kids so they could do something different. And his little lad, as his dad would have seen it, ends up being a minister in the Home Office. That would have been something his dad would have been incredibly proud of, I'd have imagined. But how many people with Kevin's background exist in Parliament today? Very few seems to be the answer. More on the Labour side you're likely to get. You still get some of the union. But I also notice, do you know, the doubt, I don't know if this is because they're Labour or because they're from certain backgrounds, I don't know. But whether they... when I say certain backgrounds, I'm talking about working class, and I can say this as somebody who grew up in that background. Is it that? Because I see a lot of ineptitude on the back. You know, I hear somebody speak, and I think, I do want my parliamentarians of whatever party to really sound like they know what they're talking about. I don't want some half-wit, whether they're Tory, whether they're Lib Dem, Labour, Reform, whoever. I want them to sound in command of their own beliefs and know their way around it with full throttle confidence. Now, there's even a counter-argument to that, isn't there? That, well, really, I mean, if somebody's really good and they're a great constituency MP, does it really matter that they can't stand at the dispatch box like Martin Luther King or Margaret Thatcher? Does that matter if they're good constituency MPs? And I guess in some respects, perhaps it doesn't. Bit of breaking news. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station have been told to prepare for evacuation over a worsening air leak. NASA said the leak was taking place on the Russian segment of the station. For now, the astronauts have been told to shelter in the spacecraft. So we'll keep our eye on that story. I don't know much about emergency procedures on international space stations, but I would imagine that an air leak is kind of up there with something that's a pretty critical situation. And we hope they can all stay safe and find their way around this. I'm sure there are procedures in place for when that happens. 0344 499 1000. Loads more comments on a variety of issues. The time now, just gone 3:15. This is Talk.
Vardo Calacane was a 32-year-old black man living in, an immigrant but with British national status, living in Nottingham, which is a city that is roughly 50-50 in its ethnic split.
Yeah.
And he murdered 3 white people and tried to murder 3 further white people. And not once in any part of the conversation or reporting was there any racial profiling or even the question raised. What if it had been another way around?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Let's just do the voice of doom before we go back to calls and comments. And thank you very much. Some lovely words to Kevin Foster, the former immigration minister. John in Lincolnshire, condolences to Kevin Foster on the loss of his dad. Brave of him to come on in the circumstances. Yeah. And Betty says, sending a big hug to Kevin Foster and anyone else who needs one today. Yeah, I think it just naturally, we were talking about something and it was natural that he would bring up his dad, and he just literally this week lost his father. So thank you for the nice comments there, and I'm sure he would appreciate that as well. Similarly, MJ, that good man came on here today when he is grieving for his amazing dad. Condolences to him. He was brave coming on. Sometimes it is the thing to do, isn't it? If you've gone through something, you just say, well, I'll sort of act a bit normally and do some normal things. That's maybe the right way to do it. Some people go straight back to work after something like that. Others take months off work, particularly affected. Different people, different responses and all of that. On a lighter note, let's talk about the voice of doom. This is the mystery voice. We played you a voice just before the news. Here it is.
In how we think about...
Who is that? That's as simple as that. These are some of the guesses. Tracy Crouch, no. Helen Whately, no. Katie Lamb, no. Mrs. Doubtfire, yes. No. Michelle Donnellan, no. Nobody got it correct. It rolls over to Monday for day 11. I do predict this one's going to go on a long time. Let's go to your calls. So much to get through. Joan is in Sunderland. Joan, what have you got for us? Good afternoon to you.
Hello to you.
Hi.
Just thinking about MPs, I watched the Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, and quite honestly, I was disgusted. The quality of some of these MPs are really, really low. But what I would like to say is, they say that there is not two-tier policing, there is not two-tier justice. Now, what I would like them to do is just be prepared to accept the channels. Now, someone phoned into Mark's programme this morning, something quite simple. Why don't these MPs go out and ask the public? Now, they came to us on the 20 in July 24 and asked us to vote for them, which we did. We put them into that house.
Well, not all of us. Well, you mean MPs or this government?
The whole lot of them.
All right, OK, fair.
Right.
I thought you meant this government. I was going to say,
No.
speak for yourself, Joan.
To represent us. Now, my challenge is, and this is one way we can readdress that terrible footage of that young man and his death. We can make something good come of this if these people are prepared to accept the challenge and to tell the truth. Go back to your areas, to your constituencies, knock on some doors, not just one or two, quite a few in various areas. Ask a simple question. Do you think there is two-tier policing and two-tier justice in this country? And listen to what the people have to say. Be honest about it. You may not like the answer. Be honest. And another thing, I would like anybody who has a visit, if any of these MPs are brave enough to accept the challenge, if you get an MP knocking on your door and asking that question, would you please phone, talk, and let them know? Because this is the only station in the country where you can voice your concerns.
Hang on.
And you get honest. This is the only programme, and I am so pleased that you accept my calls. I listen to it all day. We've got people from all over the place. Sometimes I agree with them, sometimes I don't, but that is their right. But let us have the truth. Let us see whether we are wrong, the public, and Parliament is right, which I know they're not. Let us have the truth and let something good become of what happened to that poor boy, because he died without dignity, and his last words on this earth was hearing a police officer more or less telling him a liar. I could sit and cry. I really could.
It is, yes.
Let us have truth.
I get
Let us have truth.
OK. Joan, thank you. You speak great words on that. Let us have truth. And, you know, life, they often say life is short, but it's never meant to be that short. And of course, sadly, we live in the human race is full of all sorts of anomalies and tragedies, and things happen, and you can't have predicted them the day before. No one imagines their kid is going to die. No one imagines their child will die before them. No one imagines their kid is going to end up with a terminal illness at the age of 1. Nobody imagines their 18-year-old lad is going to go out for a couple of pints with his mates and never come home again. It's that image of Henry. There's a shot of him. I think he's leaving the student digs in a lift, and he's just checking his hair in the lift to make sure he looks okay. Something that, let's be honest, everybody does that. Perfectly natural stuff. At that point, he would have had not even a clue that, 3-4 hours later, he wouldn't be alive. And I find that image almost as haunting. All right, nothing could be as haunting as the body cam footage, but you hear what I'm saying. It is so random. It is so shocking, and it's just impossible to get your head around, which is why, and the reason I mention all of that, because Joan just very kindly talked about how this is a bit of a sounding board here at Talk, and we do pick those subjects that we know. In fact, we don't have to pick them, because I think you pick them, really, because we know what most people are likely to be animated about. The problem we all have, and that's not a problem here, this is a problem in the system. I think social media, again, plays a massive part in this. We don't do nuance very well anymore. But my experience of kind of doing these kind of shows for a long, long time is that usually the truth of something does tend to sit, annoyingly, somewhere kind of between two extreme views. Now, most people are in that place. They're in that bit of the Venn diagram which can accept a bit of that view and a bit of that view. But because we live in increasingly entrenched territory when it comes to opinion and debate and discussion, the polarity is haunting. And it's troubling. It's completely useless. It doesn't help anything, and it never gets us to any progress. And there's the problem. But it's true. There is a nuance in this. It's very attractive to not see nuance these days, to stand there and just opine and give a great big bloody monologue about how this is the case or that's the case. And that's great. There's a place for all of that. But I think what's great about this format is that we do nuance, and people can call in with their, a variant of views on things. And then there are some things where the nuance is almost non-existent, and neither should there be any question over something. And the death of poor Henry is, and how it happened in terms, how the arrest happened, and the police action is there for all to see. David in Leicestershire has this thought. He says they handcuffed poor Henry to demonstrate what a thorough job they did protecting the poor victim who accused him of racism, all on camera, and they knew it. All after promotion. Disgusting, says David. I wonder if we will ever know. Probably not. Probably not. The one thing I find interesting, I was just talking about nuance there, is that what we have discussed for the last 5 days on this station since the court case, there was no, as far as I know, the judge made no mention of what we've been talking about. And neither did Henry's father. Now, Henry's father might have thought, this is not an argument I want to have, or I want to have now. I don't know. I don't know. I just find that interesting that, and I would assume, by the way, that body cam footage would have been shown in court. Of course it would have been. And it's even possible that the family, you'd think it would be possible, but they might have seen it before. They might have requested to see it, or certainly given some information about it. Because that would have been, the thought that Henry's family, the first time they saw that footage, was sitting in a courtroom in Southampton, would be beyond tragic. I can't imagine any judge would allow that to happen, and any police officer. But you, of course, have to be careful when you're sharing evidence, even in a court case such as this, where it seems to be a sort of cut and dry case. But that's my only take on it, that I've got a little question mark wondering why that was. Because I think, had that been, and I don't even want to say the words, but had that been somebody you know, that might even be my central point that I would have made. How the hell was it allowed to end like this? His life had been snuffed out, and the best you can hope for is some dignity, laying on the lap of a caring police officer who'd called the emergency services and was giving you attention and love and care in what was clearly a dying moment. That you could cope with that. It might even give you a crumble of comfort. Let's go to Ian down in London. Let's get back to where we began, Ian, on, well, who we vote for, really, and the kind of people we want. What are your thoughts? Hi.
Hi, it's Mr. Tufton Centre again.
Mr. Tufton Centre is back.
He's back. No, the one thing that does that, like, really makes me worry with all of this, with the area, I can't remember the name, but like where they're doing the vote with everything, with Andy Burnham.
Makerfield.
Is Makerfield. The simple factor is he's going into that just purely and simply to get back into the House of Commons to try and get to Starmer's job, correct? That's all he's actually saying. He's not saying anything. I've not heard him.
Well, what he is actually, you're right. I mean, that would be most people's assessment of what's going on. He said, I think last night, in a number of ways, that actually, when he was in government before, so he's trying to avoid this professional Westminster politician tag. He's saying he can get things done from Westminster for communities like Makerfield. I mean, how much you believe in that or buy into that is another matter. I don't know whether Keir Starmer, whose constituency is Holborn, I think, isn't it? I think it's Holborn.
I think it's Holborn or...
Yeah, St Pancras and Holborn.
Islington is Corbyn. Corbyn is Islington.
Corbyn is, yes. I don't know whether Keir Starmer would say he's got a lot done for his constituency as a result of being the Prime Minister.
No, so my point is...
You can't make planning rules change just because you're the Prime Minister, right? So it wouldn't be that, so I don't know what it is.
No, to me, the only reason that a lot of the Labour sort of supporters there would be voting for him, to a degree, is they want the kudos to say, we've got the Prime Minister as our local constituency MP. Because quite simply, everything that he sort of goes for is all the...
Ian, we lost you. We lost Ian in London. I hope he doesn't think... Do you know what? I always panic at this point because I always think, oh, God, I really hope he doesn't think we've cut him off or something. We certainly didn't, but I think we got the broad brush of a lot of what he was saying there. 0344 499 1000. Debbie, very briefly, says, on defence, we were talking about that a little earlier, the public and wider society do realise we need to do more for defence. It's the bloody political class that doesn't. Either that or they just have run out of money. Where's the money come from? Is there a better way to do money? We've all got our pet sort of bullet point list, haven't we, of what you could do or how you should spend the money and what you shouldn't spend the money on, etc. We're going to talk fish and chips in a second as well. I love fish and chips. I love it. Today is National Fish and Chip Day. Find out more coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Sarah. It says, if Burnham wins Makerfield, can we stop pretending the Labour Party stands for working class people, having just taken the voice away from working classes for a career politician whose only ambition is number 10. I may have read that one a little earlier, but it's a powerful one because it does rather represent a point about people who, in this case, Andy Burnham, there's no way around that, it's not a partisan point, just a fact, is clearly standing, demonstrably standing, because it's a stepping stone to a, quote, a greater job, that of Prime Minister. Sarah, thank you for that. So, did you even know, and shame on if you didn't, that today marks National Fish and Chip Day, celebrating one of Britain's best-loved dishes. Organisers say this year's event will reach millions of people and involve thousands of chippies across the UK. Rising oil prices, though, have put extra pressure on the industry, but today is a chance to celebrate the best of British. Let's speak with Gary Lewis, President of the National Edible Oil Distributors Association. Afternoon to you, Gary.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us. I think there's a lot of people that would never have heard of the National Edible Oil Distributors Association.
Your iPad. No, you're quite right, but I think it's been going on the 11th year, and every year the momentum keeps changing.
I tell you what, stay with us, Gary, because we've got a little bit of a sound issue, and we're going to right that straight away. We're aware of what it is, and we'll put it to rights, get the right buttons clicked, and we'll get straight back to you. This one comes in from Howard. The current crop of group of MPs, he says, are proof that education does mean intelligence. So yes, normal everyday people should, even a brain surgeon, never done it before the first time. Look at what degrees have done for the police. Same with nurses. We swap people who cared for people with a degree. It's a good point. We've got Gary Lewis back with us. You all right, Gary?
I am, thank you. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, loud and clear at this end. So I was just asking, the National Edible Oil Distributors Association, not necessarily something that's in everybody's contact book.
It's not, but it's becoming more aware because this is our 11th year, and every year it just goes from strength to strength. And as you can imagine, at the moment, it's even more important to celebrate with all the business being hit.
Indeed, what I was going to say, and one particular business is chippies, they rely on edible oil. That's how the whole thing rolls. Without it, they're stuffed. And, of course, they've seen prices hike. And that's out of everybody's control, it seems, domestically. Give us an idea, if you can, of what we're looking at in terms of how much more expensive, I don't know, a box of oil costs compared to what it did a few years back.
Well, it's been a really difficult few years. One of the biggest impacts we've seen, obviously, since Ukraine, prices rallied since Ukraine, because people realize that Ukraine and Russia are massive exporters and producers of things like sunflower and rapeseed oil. And this year, it's been more difficult, not only because of the Middle East conflict, is that when prices of vegetable oils go up, it encourages biodiesel. So lots of vegetable oils are used in alternative fuels. And if you think about the impact on businesses, it's not just about sort of the oil prices, then the gas prices are going up. The government's putting through, obviously, national insurance contributions up. So from every angle, commodity-based and obviously government action has been quite a difficult time for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, you know, the difficulty is that retailers and chippies and the like, they've got to balance this, haven't they? Because you can't... I mean, I spoke to one guy, although he was running a pub, but he gave me I can't remember what the figure was, but he said if I had to charge for my burgers... Exactly. If I had to put the increase every time something for me goes up, he said it would be, I'd never sell a burger because it would be too ridiculous. And you would understand that. And I think those that run chip shops, they, you know, absolutely understand that because nothing's going down.
Nothing's going down. And I think, as you asked the question before, we've seen prices, at least on some of the vegetables, go up 10, 15% since the start of the year. And if you add in sort of gas prices going up 150, 160%, and that's why I think, but businesses are trying to adapt, Ian. They really are trying to innovate. They're trying to give better portion control and give value. I think consumers do appreciate the challenges facing businesses now. And I think today's event actually is about going out there and supporting all these shops. They're all independent businesses, all the suppliers supplying these fish and chip shops to help them get through this difficult period.
And we often talk about, you know, what is Britain's national dish, and sometimes people say, oh, actually, it's curry now. But I still think if you were asking anyone around the world about, you know, British grub, the kind of thing that it's not even a guilty pleasure. It's, frankly, I consider it to be a staple of your diet, part of your 5 a day almost. Everybody would say fish and chips. Well, it's still fish and chips.
It is still fish and chips, and I think it's still the favourite dish. Yes, curry is there as well. And one of the impacts we've seen from our campaign over the last 11 years, the outreach is not just the UK. So people are eating fish and chips around the world. So people are looking at what we're doing and celebrating. And I'm even watching programmes now where Americans are coming over just to eat fish and chips.
Yeah.
They don't come over to eat burgers. They don't come over to eat curry. It's because of our favourite dish, really.
Yeah. I had fish and chips once in Australia, and it was a different experience because the fish, I think it was, I can't remember the name of it. You might even know, Gary, but it was a form of, it's a shark, basically. Not like a great white or anything. There wasn't some sort of huge 25-foot long thing hanging in the back. But it was, nonetheless, it wasn't called shark, but it had it, whatever the name was. And it was all right, but I did think, wait, this felt like, I can see where they got this idea from.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things we've done from the press last couple of days. People have their favourite dish. They like cod, they like haddock. We're seeing people introduce things like pollock because it's a cheaper fish. But like you, I think I'd like my cod. I like my chips done in a certain way, from a certain chippy, and there's certain things that it does because it does it the way I like it.
Yeah, spot on. Gary, great to have you on, sir. Thank you for your time. Gary Lewis is the president of the National Edible Oil Distributors Association. NEODA would be the acronym for that. It's interesting. It's got expensive, hasn't it? We had this in from Julie in Kent, who says, fish and chips really is too expensive for my family, plus my energy bills are going up 400 quid a year from July. Might not even get homemade fish at home from July. We've worked out a kind of hybrid way. We worked out that, I mean, the kids aren't big fish and chip fans. They like a bit of it. But we seem to get in chippies a lot of chips. Now, is that being done to make up for the increased costs? So we never need more than one. We get one portion of chips from the chippy for 4 of us, and it does it fine. The kids will have a little bit. we can divide, and sometimes there's some left as well. But when you start, I mean, the fish and chip was once upon a time, was your kind of, your affordable, cheeky, maybe once a week takeaway. Could be on a Friday, might be on a Saturday. But you take the point, and it's not that anymore. It is much more expensive. I mean, of course, if you go to a McDonald's or something, they clearly have the might and the financial backing. I know these things are franchised out, but, you know, the whole thing is a massive billion, trillion pound affair, and it's global. You know, the average chip shop is a one-man band, and that's really hard. And you can see the diversification. Do you know what? Again, because I've done this job for so long, I can tell you without any shadow of a doubt, we could do 3 hours now on fish and chips, because we'd get into mushy peas, yes or no. The answer is no, by the way. You should go to jail for that. We'd get into pickled onions, pickled eggs. We'd get into scampi, fried chicken. Saveloy, that divides the room, doesn't it? A saveloy. Some people love a saveloy. Some people absolutely hate a saveloy. Then you get into pies. As kids, never had pies from a chippy. Minced beef and onion pie, chicken and mushroom pie. There was another one as well. I remember in the chippy I worked at when I was at school, there were 3 pies, and they were marked out by the colour of the foiled tray they were in. So the silver one was, I think, steak and kidney or minced beef and onion. The blue one was chicken and mushroom, and then there was a red one. I don't know what the red one would have been. Either way, there's enough to talk about in terms of fish and chips to last you at least one show. We could probably do the whole day, I reckon, on fish and chips. And then it's the kind of chips as well, you know, hand cut. Some chippies, not good British, I have to say, not good British fish and chip shops do this. But you might get a shop that also does fish. See, there's a Chinese near me, but also do fish and chips. And that's a bit weird. But their chips are definitely frozen chips that are stuck in the fryer for, 2 minutes and they're ready. No. You can't be doing that kind of lark at a fish and chip shop. I want that stuff peeled and cut on site, fried, almost in front of my eyes as they sizzle away. And they've got to come out a certain colour. Yeah, they can't be overdone, but they certainly can't be underdone. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to David in Coventry. We're back to British politics. David, what are you thinking? Hi.
You basically, I'm going to pull you up on a particular comment you made earlier.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to get you back on, David. We've got a funny line going on there, but we'll take a short break and we'll get back to you. Callum says, I had fish and chips in Australia too. I think it was called snapper when I had it. That sounds about right, which is shark. Is it called a snapper shark? I don't know. Or is that just a colloquial sort of Aussie name? You want some snapper, mate? You can kind of hear it, can't you? The fish in Australia is hake, says Steve in Hemel. But hake's not shark, is it? Hake's hake, surely. Or is it snapper? Oh, man alive, we've gone down a right old rabbit hole here. We're now talking about Australian fishing. I mean, how dare the Aussies even have a kind of toe in the waters of this discussion? Somebody called Scottish says spam fritter. Yeah, spam fritter. I would draw a line on a spam. I'd draw a line on spam, but a spam fritter. Didn't Findus used to do spam fritters? I'm sure they did. 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you coming next on Talk.
Vardo Calacane was a 32-year-old black man living in, an immigrant but with British national status, living in Nottingham, which is a city that is roughly 50-50 in its ethnic split.
Yeah.
And he murdered 3 white people and tried to murder 3 further white people. And not once in any part of the conversation or reporting was there any racial profiling or even the question raised. What if it had been another way around?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We have had a little bit of pre-summer interference with the phone lines. We lost Ian a little earlier, a couple of calls that have gone a bit wobbly in Dalek fashion. We do persist, however. Alan is in North Yorkshire. What have you got for us, Alan? Afternoon to you.
Hello, it's old boy here. First and foremost, my condolences to our friend because life's a bitch. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, you're there. Sorry.
OK, I apologise. It doesn't matter. Go on, you carry on.
I just said I was my condolences to our friend who's lost his father.
Yeah. OK.
We all know there's a blind man on a galloping horse can see what's going on here. It's about if Farage's party win that election, like the tsunami that will go down to London and Westminster,
Yep.
there'll have to be a general election.
Do you think so? Do you think there will be or there should be?
Well, in the first place, there should have been. But
there never is there? We've changed a lot of prime ministers recently, and there's not always a general election.
Well, no, but the other point I want to make, Mr. Collins, is that as a Makerfieldian, if that's what they're called, voter, I didn't vote for Andy Burnham to be my MP in the first place. I voted for Simons. Right, I didn't vote for Burnham. He was thrust upon me, and that would give me the right ump. And also, we know.
So Josh Simons was the previous MP who stood down to make way for Andy Burnham. So
yeah.
You're saying you personally, or you hypothetically, you wouldn't vote?
No, if I was a Makersfield person, I wouldn't.
Okay.
No, I certainly wouldn't, because I want to choose my MP. That's my right.
Well, it's interesting because there was a bit of a political gamble, wasn't there, from Burnham and the previous MP in that respect, because you know, you could argue it's not a good look to do it that way in order to get a man a job, particularly since, as you just rightly said, Al, you know, if people voted for somebody and then they're removed because the person that wants to be parachuted in has desires to become the Prime Minister, you know, that there could be a significant amount of voters, as I think Alan there is highlighting, that will be a bit miffed about that. Alan, thank you. I'm only cutting you short to get more comment on. I want to get a voice from Richard in North London. We've not got long, Richard, but I'm sure we can do it. What have you got for us?
Hi, Ian. A bit depressing this week, obviously. Terrible news about the boy murdered. I mean, I think the one thing that hasn't been said is that, and I think we sort of said this really after the Southport thing and after the rape gangs, we badly need some sort of inquiry into integration in this country, because there is a sense in which things are kind of, well, what concerns me is this, and I'll be careful what to say. If you look at, there's a pattern, obviously, from Southport and from some of the worst terrorist events of the last 20 years. People from certain ethnicities seem to have a great deal of anger, and that's why some of these events appear to happen. I mean, this thing down in Southampton, I mean, it doesn't matter what the guys do. I mean, the guy, even if the guy did say a racist thing, it doesn't. I mean, he's... No,
it doesn't. But I mean, you say ethnicities, and I don't say this to be politically correct, but of course there are an awful lot of horrendous crimes that happen from people who are, you know, what you would call white British. I mean, we have to clearly say that. And I don't know what proportions are. In terrorism, that's one thing. In terms of straight case murder, I couldn't tell you, but, you know, I think all groups are represented.
I mean, there are some figures that are presented by Cressida Dick 5 years ago, when she said people...
Yes, but I don't know whether that was about murder and homicide and attempted murder. I remember those figures. I do remember. I do recall.
I think the British people are the most incredibly tolerant anywhere in the world. I only hope countries, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, see what's going on and just don't go down our road, because I just think it's incredibly difficult now you can't even talk about these problems intelligently.
I get it. Listen, no, I do. Well, if we had longer, we could pursue this into a whole other subject. Richard, thank you, mate, for that. Richard down in London. We've talked a lot there about the Makerfield by-election. Let's get a reminder of the candidates. Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats. Count Binface Party. Andy Burnham, the Labour Party. Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party. John Dyer, Independent. Ed Gemmell, Climate Party. Paul Gould, Independent. Alan Howling, Lord Hope, the official monster raving loony party. Robert Kenyon, Reform UK. Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild. Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield, Green Party. Peter Ward, Rejoin EU, and Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. And that is the list of those standing. Duncan Barks is here after the news. On drive, Duncan.
Ian Collins, how are you?
I'm good. Listen, we were talking about fish and chips. I know you're going to touch on this a little later. Do you still do your podcast?
I do, but it's not about fish and chips.
No, it's about sausages.
It's about sausages.
And it's called
Prick with a Fork.
Prick with a Fork.
It's the world's only regular podcast all about sausages. It's 7 years old.
Is it 7 years now you've been doing that? How do you not run out of sausages?
Because I spend a lot of my life... Well, I make my own sausages.
Oh, get out of here.
So I do two lots of things on this pod. It's very kind of you to ask me. So I do two lots. I do taste testing of stuff that you get in supermarkets.
Yep.
Most recent taste test was the Marmite Jolly Hog sausage.
Get out of here. Nice.
And go to the YouTube channel and check out my review. Yourself. But also, I make my own sausages, and that's a never-ending journey of pleasure to stuff to talk about on the pod.
Fantastic.
Yeah. But it's Fish and Chip Day, isn't it?
It's Fish and Chip Day.
It's not sadly Sausage Day.
It's not Sausage Day.
We're going to go on the hunt for Britain's best chippy and also talk to a chip shop in Scotland. But on a more serious note, this staggering report that was released today by a cross-party group of MPs about our asylum system. So people apply for asylum. They go through the process. The people who apply get told, sorry, mate, you failed the process, you're not having asylum in this country, then we lose track of them. In what world? What world?
Nobody can work this out.
No, it's just like, in what world? I was saying earlier, I drive in from the wilds of West Sussex. I suspect my journey of about 2 hours and 10 minutes was pretty much tracked all the way here.
Yeah.
A combination of ANPR cameras and everything else that's going on.
Your phone.
Yeah, everything. You know, but we have people who shouldn't be in this country. They tried to get in this country. We said, sorry, mate, you're not staying in this country. And then we lose track of them. How does that work?
I have not. We spoke to a former immigration minister a little earlier on this very point. I said, you must have been at the meetings, surely, when someone's gone, hang on a second, look, we've got this whole cohort of people. They've been refused the right to stay here. So the time's now 1:30. By about 6 o'clock, we're over at Heathrow for the first flight. It doesn't happen.
But instead it's just like, well, sorry, maybe better luck next time if